Zoning Commission started. For the record, Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Cannon are absent. We got a couple of things we're going to do first. Before we get on the agenda, we got a couple of things to do. I'm going to have to come up front for these. I don't know how many of y'all are aware, but in the past year and a half, we've been working on our comp plan update. I was lucky enough to be the chairman of that also. We had a lot of people that were dedicated a lot of time to this update. It took a year and a half to do this update for our comp plan. Our comp plan is what tells us what we need to vote on up here pretty much. It gives us guidelines on how we should vote. And, I'm very pleased to say that Matt and Taylor have attended the American Planning Association's conference in Berea at the Boone Tavern. Today was the first day, right? You're going back tomorrow. And they received an award at that conference. The American Planning Association Kentucky chapter proudly presents this special merit award for outstanding comprehensive plan to the Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission for the Great Scott Plan for May of 2018. This is through the entire state. This is just says how much work that these guys put in on this plan. Megan's not here. Megan Chan, she was a big part of this plan. She had a baby, moved, got married, I think, all through this plan. I mean, she went through a lot for this plan. But I'm very pleased with these guys and what they did to receive this award for all of Scott County. And it just shows their dedication to Scott County. Next, we actually lost somebody out of the planning staff. Been with us for a while. 12 years, so he retired on us. Some people get lucky, I guess. But we want to honor him with this plaque. It says Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission, resolution number 1801, a resolution related to the retirement of senior engineer, technician, and former commission member John Carter, and the expression of appreciation for his service. Upon the occasion of the retirement of John Carter after 12 years of service with the Planning Commission, and after previously serving as a valuable member of the Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission, it is appropriate to express the appreciation of the commission staff, and the citizens of Scott County for his commitment to the community through his dedication and expertise in the commission's important work. During his tenure, the community experienced significant growth accompanied by major infrastructure construction. Under his guidance and through his strong relationship with those in the construction trade and his active leadership and good judgment, the commission elevated the standard for protecting the public interest. John strived to ensure that the infrastructure being built under his watch was of consistent high quality, thus providing an ongoing benefit to the public. With his knowledge, good humor, and dedication, the commission continued in its duty of overseeing the orderly growth and land use of the great community. On motion of Steve Smith, was seconded by Regina Mizell, the commission unanimously adopts the foregoing resolution declaring John Carter worthy of this recognition. John, if you'd come up. If I knew you were going to say all these nice things, I'd ask for a raise.
John, can we get a picture with the board? If y'all mind coming around front? You gotta put it in the newsletter.
Yeah, we're coming.
One more appearance.
Wants down front.
I don't need Charlie.
Congratulations.
All right. Got the Charlies at the end.
Both ends.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next thing I'd like to do before we get on the agenda is welcome our newest member. We've been months waiting on this one. Mr. Mifflin, welcome to the commission.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, it's a record can show he was sworn in right before the meeting started.
Yes, so noted. All right, our first item of business will be the approval of the April invoices. If everyone's had a chance to glance over, we'll take a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Mizell,
Second.
second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion approved. Approval of the April 12th, 2018 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the April 12th minutes.
Motion by Mr. Solsky. Second by Mr. Wiseman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion approved. Approval of the May agenda.
Make a motion to approve the May agenda.
A motion by Mr. Moran. Need a second.
Do we need to update this agenda before we?
Yeah,
Did you say the,
Old
Joe, did you say
business.
A is
We'll
in old
go in,
business? Was post-
we'll go in postponements and stuff here in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no,
We had a motion by Mr. Moran.
Mr. Jones?
Yes, sir.
We do have one addition to the agenda.
Okay.
We have a request for a waiver, on the Miami Barnes.
Is that gonna be another business?
Under other business, C, item C.
C?
Yeah.
What was it?
A request for a waiver from, Miami Valley Barnes. They're asking to postpone construction of improvements.
With that added item. Mr. Moran, you still got the motion?
Make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition to item C under other business.
Motion by Mr. Moran,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion approved. Postponements and withdrawals, we do have one postponement, right, Joe?
Yes, we do. Item under old business, PDP 2017-33. There was a condition of approval that it comes back before the planning commission for the final development plan review, and we did get that in, and they did do notices, but it hasn't gone through TRC, and staff hasn't had time to review it, so we are asking to postpone that item.
So we do have that one postponement if you're here for that. PDP 2017-33 of self-storage units. So that will be postponed. So our first application we'll be hearing is PDP 2018-14, Jimmy John's.
Do we have anything for consent?
consent?
We don't have any consent, do we?
I thought we had
Well,
one.
Well,
we do
I
have
thought-
two items that are eligible.
I thought they had
Jimmy
variance.
John's has a small waiver.
No, I wanna hear Jimmy John's.
Yeah, Landmark Office Center, is eligible for consent.
Okay. So we'll hear Jimmy John's, but, FDP 2018-15, Landmark Office Center amended. Final development plan amended to remove detention basin, dirt drainage to another detention basin and replace with additional parking lot on Bevins Lane. Is anyone here in opposition of this application?
Speak on
The Landmark Office amended plan?
it. Mr. Chairman,
If no one's here in opposition, then we'll take a motion.
I've moved we accept it by consent.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Mr. Solsky for the Landmark Office to be considered for consent. Is, anyone opposed? Those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion approved.
Better ask from Nate.
Did Joe say that the Jimmy John's was also eligible?
No.
No, I want to hear Jimmy
Oh,
Jones.
you want to hear it?
What's his name? So the Landmark Office has been approved on consent, so. you can
And
sign
since
it
here
right.
on next, I need a signature from him.
First application we'll hear is PDP 2018-14, Jimmy John's preliminary development plan to construct a 4,870 square foot commercial building on 1.03 acre site located at 355 Connector Road north of Burger King.
This preliminary development plan application as you mentioned, is for a new commercial building. The applicant is proposing a 4,870 square foot commercial building, proposed to be located at 350 Connector Road. The site, the project site, has a total acreage of 1.03 acres. It's currently zoned B2, which is our highway commercial district, and the surrounding zones are all B2 highway commercial as well. The project site does have a single road access point off of Connector Road, and there is one waiver request with this application. So, as I mentioned, the zoning of the project site and the surrounding properties, this triangular shaped lot here that's highlighted in the PowerPoint is the project site. As you can see, all the surrounding zones are the same type. Just for some additional context, this is Connector Road. It's a state maintained road that runs along the western side of the property and would be the road that provides access. When we look at the proposed development plan for this site, so this, if you imagine, this site is turned, the north actually is to the left on the screen, so it has been rotated somewhat just so it would fit on the development plan sheet. So Connector Road would be here along the bottom, and this is their proposed entrance. They have an entrance, and then there's, I believe, a left and a right-hand turn lane for exiting traffic. This is the Burger King here to the south on this screen. It's on the right-hand side, and there are two proposed access points to that property, one in the front and one in the rear. The project site will have sort of a sidewalk along the front of the building, and as you can see, they've labeled a portion of it already for the proposed Jimmy John's, and then the remainder, as of yet, will just be leasable commercial space. There's no user designated at this time, or a user hasn't been, or a leasee hasn't been identified. They are providing some sidewalk and crosswalk connectivity here to the south to the Burger King lot. Depending on what this commercial space ends up being, it might be possible that somebody might stop at one site and visit the other. So that's in meeting with our regulations. The applicant is proposing an appropriate amount of parking given the commercial space that they're looking to build, and they have more than enough handicap accessible parking to meet our requirements as well. As far as landscaping, there's no property perimeter landscaping required for this project, since it is a commercial site and it's surrounded entirely by other commercial sites. There is landscaping required around the vehicular use area, and the applicant is showing an appropriate amount of landscaping, with the exception being this small area here between these two trees. I think it's probably just more of a slight error than anything else, but that area between those two trees will also need shrubs, just like the remainder of the perimeter. As far as the interior VUA landscaping, this is the area where the applicant is requesting a waiver. Our regulations would require that they provide 11 trees in their interior landscaped areas, and currently they're only showing 7. They are meeting our canopy requirements for the project site, and actually exceeding it by about 5,000. Yeah, what looks to be about 5,000 square feet. So my recommendation, as far as their waiver, is that we grant them the waiver. Because they are exceeding our total canopy requirements. That'll offset it somewhat. And then the second being that there is some justification for this site in granting a little bit of leniency due both to the somewhat irregular shape of the lot. We don't come across triangular shaped lots all that often, and it does present some challenges when trying to fit what are typically usually rectangular or square shaped buildings on the site, as well as the associated parking. And the other thing that I would note is that, the applicant in this case has, in addition to their entrance from the street, they have both a front and a rear access point to the neighboring property, which in a lot of ways cuts down on some of the area that they might have otherwise been able to use to meet some of those interior landscaping requirements. So with all that in mind, the preliminary development plan does comply with our comprehensive plan by providing infill development. This is a site that's remained vacant while most of the other property around it has developed. So this is an appropriate use for the zoning district. It's infill development, and I think their waiver request is reasonable. So I am recommending approval of this application with the waiver and the 8 conditions that are listed in the staff report.
Does anyone on the commission have any questions for Matt?
Matt, one thing I had thought about, we had talked about connectivity from this parcel down to Coles or other areas. I'm sure it's not possible to do it vehicular, for vehicles, but it'd be possible to put a pedestrian connection to where you could walk down, where people don't have to walk through the bushes or something. If there was any way to do that, I think it'd be smart.
I think the concern would probably be sort of somewhat the same as the vehicular access. One of the reasons that there's not vehicular connectivity is because the property slopes off, and I think there might be some concern that if the applicant was to provide a pedestrian connection there, that it may not meet some of the slope requirements for ADA compliance. That would be my guess.
I'm just thinking, if you ever want to do it, now's the time.
Yeah.
Matt, because I'm new to
Yeah.
this process, let me ask a couple of questions.
Yeah.
If this is approved, then those other 2 commercial lease spaces, is it our responsibility to say what can or cannot go in there? Or have we just approved the overall building
Yeah.
location?
So at this time, we're really approving the building. Obviously, that lease space could be used for a variety of things. This particular zoning district probably is our most intensive commercial zoning district that we have. So there are a large number of uses that are permitted. However, yes, it would fall upon staff in the commission to ensure that uses that want to use that leasable space are permitted under our zoning ordinance and meet the requirements.
Okay, they have, up to 3 drive-through locations. That back drive-through location, do you foresee any problems with that? If all 3 of them are fast food type restaurants, is that gonna present a problem with the drive-through for Jimmy John's and, where they're coming out and people in line for Jimmy John's?
Yeah. I was going to say, my interpretation of it was that the one in the rear was more for stacking distance for the Jimmy John's.
Okay.
I don't know that they intend for there to be 3 drive-throughs.
Okay.
2 maybe.
It's very.
All right.
It looks like it's very similar to what they have currently. They've got the back road behind
Right.
the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I read somewhere in there that up to,
It is.
3
I think
drive-throughs.
that remaining leasable space is large enough that they could, in theory, possibly divide that into two leasable areas. I don't know I guess what their intent is with that space.
okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hey, Matt, how did you base the parking spaces for a commercial lease space that we don't even know what it is?
Yeah, so we have I guess since we didn't know what exactly the use would be for that, we do have sort of a general commercial standard that we go by, which is about 1 space for every 150 square feet of floor area.
Would that be the heaviest use for that space?
Yeah, it is the same as our standard for fast food restaurants. Something with a high turnover but also potentially, heavy use at certain times of the day.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, I stand corrected.
Oh.
The layout issue there, you said allow for 2 potential drive-throughs, and I took that as 2 additional.
2 additional, okay.
So, I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Applicant present?
Members of the commission, my name's Jonathan Otis, and I'm representing the Jimmy Johns. I think that Matt did fine for my sake. I don't know if you have any particular questions. Like I said, I do think that we probably, and I can certainly fill in for the final development plan, another little bunch of hedge in there, but I think we've really got landscaping pretty much covered. If we had a little better opportunity to actually have the normal islands where the trees ended up being more interior, I think that would have made him a little happier, but otherwise I've got trees every 40 feet as requested. So.
You good with the conditions of approval? You accept the
Sure.
conditions of
Yes, sir.
approval?
Mhm.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
This will be replacing the Jimmy John's that's down the street, correct?
That would be my assumption, but I won't say that for sure.
You didn't have to do a traffic study, did you?
No.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got any more questions? Yes, sir.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie, we need to swear everybody in, I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In case there's anyone who wants to
Everyone
speak.
signed in to speak, including you, Mr. Otis. If you can stand and raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the statements you're to give tonight to be the truth to the best of your information and belief? Thank you all.
Thank you, folks. Does anyone in the audience have anything to say on this application? If not, does anyone from the commission have anything else?
I'll make a motion to,
I'd like to say one
oh,
thing.
you want to, go ahead, sorry.
That's the only reason I wanted to hear it. Y'all know how I feel about anything on Connector Road, and I think you got a good plan, but my vote will be no on this because I don't feel like we need to push any more traffic on Connector Road at this point. I feel like Connector Road needs to be worked on, and we need to start alleviating some traffic problems over there. We can't just keep building and building and building, so. But I think you do have a good plan, so now you can make your motion.
I'll make my motion to approve PDP 2018-14.
Motion by Mr. Solsky,
Second?
second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Me. So, Chair votes no and Mr. Wiseman votes no. Motion is approved. You can sign your papers over here with Charlie, please.
He's got blue. Oh, you got red.
Our next application will be
D.
That's right.
what's wrong with C?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. PSP 2018-16 Villages at Lanes Run, Phase 2, Section 3 amended. Preliminary subdivision plat amended for 61 single-family residential lots on 13.412 acres located at Waterside Drive.
Okay. This is an amended preliminary subdivision plat. This area of the Villages of Lanes Run is the last remaining area west of Lanes Run Creek. It's this area in red. Phase 1 was developed approximately started about 8 years ago. It's being completed now. They filled in this area between Lanes Run and Rocky Creek. Rocky Creek is further to the southwest. All the infrastructure streets are in for those sections. The last remaining section is this area. It connects Villages of Lanes Run to the backside of Rocky Creek on Johnston Trail. So Johnston Trail will connect here, and this is Dalton here. So it will build out that last section. There was a preliminary subdivision plat approved in 2014 for 61 lots, essentially the same layout that backed up to Lanes Run Creek. One of the conditions of approval at that time was that there was a tree preservation area shown on the plat adjoining Lanes Run Creek. That area was to be preserved, and those trees were not to be removed in the tree preservation buffer. We got a call about 2 months ago, I think it was, that there was some tree clearing going on. We investigated and found that the trees in this tree preservation buffer were being cleared. We stopped work, issued a notice of violation, and we told the what turned out to be the potential buyer of the property and the current owner of the property that they'd have to return to Planning Commission to get their preliminary plat approved again, since they were in violation of one of the conditions of the previous approval, and they would either have to come up with some type of mitigation plan to replace those trees, or amend their plat and get Planning Commission to approve an amended plat that removed the tree preservation buffer. That's what they felt needed to be done in order to build out these lots. So they have returned, put them on the agenda, and that's what you're reviewing tonight, an amended preliminary subdivision plat for the same area that had a previous approval. You can see it's heavily treed. This is phase one. This aerial's from 2010 in the fall, so no leaf on, but these areas have street connections made. These lots are largely built out, and Dalton connects right here. Johnston Trail is also built. This phase is built, and it stubs at this end of the property. So you can see the tree, it's heavily treed. Here's Lanes Run Creek. The trees run up the slope and cover a large part of the property. The trees that were cut, the main issue we have, although we would have preferred that none of them were cut, but the main issue we have were the trees that were cut in the tree preservation buffer, which roughly follows the floodplain boundary along the creek. The plat that we have that was resubmitted is essentially the same plat that was approved previously. They have increased the tree preservation buffer about 3/4 of an acre. So previously it was about a little over 1.5 acres, and now it's almost 2.5 acres. It's essentially in the same area, but they've taken some of the lots out of the tree preservation area, some of the lot area out of it, and they've taken them out of the floodplain. So they've shortened some of these lots along the creek. The road layout is the same. The number of lots are the same, so they're still asking for approval of 61 lots. Same road layout and connections, same minimum lot widths. So the lot widths, density, and setbacks all match the previous plat. So as with the other plat, we are recommending approval of the plat itself, but the issue we have is how to deal with the tree preservation area that's been largely cleared of the large trees. So what we're recommending is that they've proposed to replace they cut 17 trees in the tree preservation buffer, 17 specimen trees. They cleared a lot of brush also, but they've proposed to replace those 17 trees with 17 new trees, fast-growing species, minimum 2-inch caliper of planting, and donate $1,000 to the city of Georgetown, their beautification fund for use in the city. We've recommended that the $1,000 probably is not a good idea. I mean, the restoration should occur on this site, since this is the area that was cleared. And we'd recommend following and just taking an objective look at it, following our landscape ordinance, which currently allows you to count existing large caliper trees towards required new plantings. And the landscape ordinance allows any tree between 6 and 12 calipers, which is diameter essentially, to count towards 2 new trees. Trees between 12 and 24 inches in caliper to count towards 3, and 24 and above to count towards 4 trees. So we're recommending that of the 17 trees, and we asked them to do a tree survey and document what was cut down and the size and species. We're recommending that they follow that landscape guidance in replacing these trees that were cut. And using this formula, they would be required to plant back 44 trees in the tree preservation buffer. We would require an 1 3/4 caliper minimum at planting, and they would have to meet our, we have a planting manual, species A and species B, which are large and medium-sized trees. So that would be our recommendation. So we are recommending approval, essentially because there was a previously approved subdivision plat that this either matches or provides even a little more buffer area along the creek, in that they restore those trees that were cut with new trees. The 17 trees be replaced with 44 new trees, minimum 1 3/4 caliper at planting.
Sounds good.
That's all we got.
Does anyone have any questions for Joe right now? Joe, the only thing I got is on those trees, is there gonna be a deadline on when they have to be replanted?
Well, I didn't set a deadline in the staff report, but you could easily set a deadline. I would say right away prior to final, as part of construction plan.
Yeah, I would think so. They need to be
in a
done.
schedule that wouldn't, as long as they were protected during construction, whatever would work.
Yeah, I'd like to see them get done pretty quickly, because that little stream gets up pretty quick. Flash floods back there, wipe those little trees out real quick.
We could require them to be planted up front
Now,
prior
right
to
now, probably a
construction.
good time. I don't, well, ask the applicant that too, so, thank you. Is the applicant here to speak?
Well, before you get, Joe, I'll ask Joe and Charlie's here. One of the things that was brought up Monday, Charlie, and I don't think you were there yet, or you weren't there at all, right?
No, I didn't make it.
I think Frank Wiseman brought it up. What can we do now to prevent this in the future? And there was an attorney present. It was Nathan Billings, if I'm not mistaken, said that we could record the preliminary plat this way, and we'll talk, maybe the applicant will explain, to prevent trees being cut, because I guess it wasn't in the deed
Well, I
recorded
think-
at the courthouse.
I think what he said, Charlie, is we could record a certificate of land use restriction. So when they were doing deed research, because one of the problems was that they didn't find the fact that there was a tree preservation buffer back there when they did their due diligence
At the
in
courthouse.
purchasing the property. So if we put a certificate of land use restriction every time there's any action that restricts a property in any way.
What are your thoughts?
Record that at the
Good idea?
courthouse.
Well, I think that's an improvement, certainly. Is this then, well, this wasn't done though by subsequent purchasers. I thought this was, a subsequent developer, is that
Correct.
what happened here?
Potential purchaser. They hadn't bought it yet, but they,
Well, first of all, I really can't imagine that not being caught anyway. I mean, that's pretty significant. But in any event, that would certainly add protection. The primary thing, of course, would be subsequent purchasers of lots and other things who don't often look very carefully at plats and the like. I wouldn't have expected that for a subsequent developer, because I would think they would be studying those things carefully. But no, that would certainly add additional protection. So,
I think
yes.
we should recommend that going forward, so it doesn't happen again. So,
Yeah.
my 2 cents.
Maybe you can draft us something up on that.
there's, yeah, I mean, we can do that without having to draft any, ordinances or anything. It's
So
just
I
something that
think
we
you're
could
right.
just start
We
doing.
could literally
but
do that for every set of conditions, so.
There's just an extra cost to that. I mean, for recording that document, it's like
That'd be up on
10
the
or
applicant anyway, wouldn't it?
$15, I'm not sure. $17.
I agree, I think it would help out, better than nothing.
It's one more thing for them to miss, one more chance that they wouldn't miss it, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here to speak?
My name's Doug Charles, and I live in Lexington. I've done some development here in Georgetown, and feel like I have a good relationship with these folks. I had bought the property. I was under contract to buy the property and from the property owner, and I was understanding there was a preliminary development plan already approved under the pretense of that. And I got the permission from the guy I was buying it from because we were closing it. I had another closing in Kansas City that was triggering on this one. And it was totally innocent, and I'm embarrassed. I wish I could change that. I've tried to make remediation to the benefit of that. It was certainly not intentional. It's been an embarrassing and expensive lesson. It's expensive from cost standpoint, resubmitting everything, time standpoint, remediation standpoint, but more importantly, it's been a ding on my credibility with you guys that I respect a lot. So I'm sorry I put everybody through this. Our intent was really to try to be more conservationist than trying to go in there and just take trees out. I mean, we didn't just take hardwoods, we took ashes and locusts and stuff that basically has no value. But the group and we stopped immediately, and we've done everything they've asked us to do to stabilize the site and those kind of things. And as you saw from the overhead, there are 7.5 acres is the portion that we purchased, and of that, 4 acres of it is wooded. And we were just trying to get to a situation because we had a fellow that was going to take out everything that we didn't know there was a preservation area, and we had 2 people that researched it on my behalf. I didn't physically go to the courthouse, but I had my guy on the ground do it and my attorney do it, and it never showed up anywhere. And we had the plan we had from the engineer that we had given the previous owner had given us. It didn't have anything on there either. And then I find out after I met with Mr. Baldwin, because I inherited him in the process, and he tells me at the Cattleman restaurant over there's a tree preservation area, and I thought I was going to choke on my salad. I had no idea, and it was redlined that you guys had done, and I had no idea of that. So, but we stopped immediately as soon as we found out about the deal, and of course those guys left, and they were going to try to salvage what we can, because there's probably in that area there's probably 1,500 trees in there, and thankfully we got stopped at somebody called because we didn't know it, and I'm glad they did when they did, because we only had taken 17 out of that particular area. So I'm here to answer any questions. Or
are you okay with replacing the 17 trees with the 44 recommended?
Oh yes, for sure.
44. Yeah, that's what Joe said.
44.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd estimated 40, but when I went back and looked at the survey, it was 44.
What about the try and get them planted?
When we would plant them, or whenever I just think we need to get everything cleared out of there and give them spacing to where we can plant them to give them the best survival rate. I just think that we need to get the underbrush out of the way so we can make it a nice area, a backdrop for these homes, because we want to do that as well.
I don't want to get it to where it's going to be in the heat of the summer where they're going to die on you.
Well, I don't think that. I would think we would do it in fall of next year before we went to platting, and that's a great time.
Try to take root, and before the spring rains, because it does flash back there, flash flood.
Generally, in my experience, you guys may know more about it than I do. We try to plant trees in the fall to let the good Lord water it and not have to worry about droughts and all those kind of things. So that's when we would do it.
I think that'd be good then, Steve.
And I think how we discussed on Monday, it was just an honest mistake.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a mistake, just an honest mistake. I'm good with it, as long as you're good with the conditions.
I am.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody got any questions for Mr. Charles?
I'll make a motion.
Well, we got to hear from the public.
Sorry, my bad. Gosh, I'm joking.
Thank you.
I swear I don't have a date tonight, I
Thank you, Mr.
promise.
Charles. Does anyone in the audience want to speak on this application? Yes, sir.
Slow down.
As far as the
Can you state your name, please?
Mark Hamill. As far as the arrangement of the preliminary plat.
Mr. Hamill, what's your address?
142 Dunn Circle.
Thank you, sir.
As far as the layout of the preliminary plan, I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is there's more than one infraction that happened here in the development community. If you have any experience in the development community, there's a lot of protocol that has to happen before you actually break ground. And it doesn't appear to me that any of that stuff took place. That's one big infraction. To ignore notes that are on a preliminary plan is a bit taboo as well. And the fact that you're working in a floodplain is another, without the proper permitting and whatnot, that's another taboo. Things that can come with a lot of ramifications. And I hear the words, it was an honest mistake, but I can tell you that if you are well known and you do this stuff over and over again, you are not afforded the excuse of it was an honest mistake. Typically you get hit with heavy ramifications. So I hear replanting and I guess I would say, it's going to take a long time to replace the trees that were cut down in many 75 years, 100 years. So there's still trees up, and I guess my suggestion would be, could you move, the area that was supposed to be preserved to those areas where they have not been disturbed. Tree preservation areas that are typically marked, the protocol is to go out there before clearing, fence it off with fence, either silt fence or snow fence, to identify that area so that no machinery enters it, that whether it's honeysuckle, whether it's briars, whether it's an oak tree or some other species, that it's just an area that you don't go into. So there wasn't a pre-construction meeting. There's clearly land being disturbed. There was a dozer back there pushing a haul road in. No erosion control mechanisms up. It was bad. It was just bad behavior from a development standpoint. So I'm throwing it out there. Why not move the area that was supposed to be preserved to an area where trees are still standing? And then there's one more point. There is a rather large oak tree back there that I would deem significant, and I'll use some methodology that I had to personally go through, where in a section right down the road, or right next door, I had to preserve that tree and create an easement around it. So I'm throwing that out there for the commission to, think about. And I have examples of what I'm talking about, if you guys care to see it.
No, that's fine.
Big oak tree.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's, if I may approach.
Yes.
Here's a copy of the plat. Right there. That's the easement that was. Here's a picture. That's the tree. That's the other tree. This is the one that you see in this image right here.
That's this one right here.
It's kind of mimic the outline of it. So this tree's bigger than that tree.
You say you had to preserve it, or you were a developer in another area?
I've worked for developers. Yeah.
We talked about that big old.
What was the reason why you had to preserve that?
Well, I was getting ready to record a plat. I had developed the community. I was trying to preserve it, but wasn't quite knowing if I could, whether it came within the influence of the housing footprints And then I was told I must preserve it at time of recording, so.
Mhm.
But that was on a prior development plan? That was not on,
Yeah, it's right next door to this.
yeah.
Yeah, the example I'm giving is
I'm
literally right there. So, let me finish by saying, I'm not opposed to the size of the lots, the layouts, all of that is in line with what is around it. I am upset that, I'm in the development community, I'm held to many standards, and I gotta make sure that I cross every T, dot every I, so that I don't get the company that I represent in trouble. So to see something like that happen, I just want fairness. I want what would be held accountable for me to be held accountable for others. So that's all I have. Appreciate your time.
Joe, are you familiar with the two trees, there's two, right? Two large trees that.
Well, one of
potentially-
them's already in an area that's already got houses built behind it. This is the only tree talking about right here.
This is a tree there.
This one here has already got houses behind it.
All right.
But he said this tree is bigger than the one that's sitting there right now.
Yeah, I do remember when that plat came through with that tree, and the attempt to try to protect it if possible. The tree on this phase of Lane's Run, we discussed it a little bit at workshop, but I didn't bring that up tonight, but they purchased all the lots and the tree preservation buffer, except for the lots along Johnston Trail, Cross Park, except for that road up top. And those lots have that tree on it. That area was purchased by Paul Haddix, who wasn't involved in the tree clearing. He's here tonight, so, he wasn't necessarily part of this application, but we had to bring it back for the whole area of the preliminary, because that was what was previously approved. So I think we try to work with Paul to preserve that tree as well. But it's not, if you have any questions, you may want to ask him to,
You have to come back up.
Is the plan, I guess is the staff, is the construction plans for the whole piece, is it all one construction plan?
originally there was a set of construction plans for the whole piece, yeah.
Mr. Charles, you want to try to address anything he said? You'll have to come up to the microphone, please.
It'll come back to him.
I understand the crux here. I'm a developer and I adhere to a lot of, and these guys here will attest to that. We have a lot of, it's not the only project we've done here. And we follow everything we've ever done and do everything we tell them we're gonna do. So I understand that. As far as the tree that, there are mature trees. There's no running from that in that whole deal, in that whole wooded area. There's some right out in the middle of the property that are, big trees, and it's got to be removed. I don't know what the preservation in those areas may or may not protocol may be, but there's trees, big trees everywhere. The tree that I think that he's referring to is not on my particular deal. And Paul bought half the property and I bought the other half. But the original plan was brought in all at one time, and then in the last 4 months, Paul bought half and I bought half. So we're talking amongst us how we can attack this together as far as a development and how we can share in that, or if our timing matches and all that kind of stuff. But the plan that Mr. Baldwin's been working on for me has only been my 7.5 acres, which does not encompass the tree that you're referring to.
Joe, can you put your map up there so we can see where he's talking about what he owns and what Mr. Haddix owns?
And if we look at that map, that big oak that the gentleman was referring to is in that bottom section where Mr. Haddock's owns. It's in that lot there.
Sir, what should someone have done to have made it easier for you to have not made this mistake? Where should it have been recorded more clearly? or
That would have helped, but.
Where? What
In
should
the
have been-
courthouse.
Should have been recorded in the courthouse?
Yes, sir.
And who should have done that?
Well, in Lexington, the city does it. I don't know that, if that's something that staff, I don't know that protocol.
Yeah, I mean, we can do it, or the attorney representing the applicant can do it.
But it just wasn't done in this case, just somebody dropped the ball, so to speak, on that?
Well, we don't typically, we've never in the past recorded certificates of land use restriction or subdivision plat or development plan approval.
So wouldn't that be pretty
To
important?
to even add to that, the plan that I was basing my deal on, actually in the tree preservation area, had a detention pond in there. There was no, the plan I had a pond. That's where the water was going. And then I think that's what was submitted to you guys, and you all redlined that, I think, or something. But that's the plan I was going on. I think that was dated in, I want to say May of 28th of 17 is the plan that the seller presented me that had been approved. So.
Had a retention pond in it?
Yes, it had a
Down in
pond
the
down there in the
floodplain?
corner.
Detention.
Down in the floodplain?
Yes, sir.
I remember this application when we first approved it. I don't ever remember a detention or retention, any kind
Am I
of
speaking
pond
correct,
there.
Mr. Baldwin?
He was going by unapproved plans, is what he was looking at.
Yeah, because I don't remember approving nothing like that before. I've got two problems right now. One is, you said, which you just answered, you said you had a preliminary plan, which you said showed a retention pond, which I don't ever remember seeing that ever before. I remember when we approved this plan the first time. My other second problem is if you've sat here and told us you're a developer, you've developed a lot of property, but this gentleman here just stated you made a road, you took a dozer down there and was moving dirt. And as far as I know, any developer I've ever known knows they gotta put up a silt fence when they start moving dirt. Knows there should be a construction meeting of some sort before they start moving any kind of dirt. So
Well,
I've got a little issue with that right now.
I was told by two different engineers in Georgetown that you didn't have to have a land disturbance permit to clear trees.
Even if there was a preliminary development plan. That's just what my problem is right now with this whole thing. I mean, I understand you're willing to replace the trees, but this gentleman did bring up some legitimate concerns. Why are we letting somebody go in and start moving dirt without silt fences, without pre-construction meetings, without? That kind of bothers me a little bit.
Understand?
What concerns me even more that the information was not there. If it was a retention pond at one time and that was all changed, why wasn't that updated so that he had the correct information so he didn't make this mistake?
Ben, did you say it was unapproved preliminary plan?
The information was all at the planning commission office. That's where it should be. It was not at the courthouse. I guess they looked at the courthouse prior to purchasing, so if they would have consulted the planning commission office, we would have presented that information.
But I mean, you mentioned that it was an unapproved development plan that showed the retention.
It was proposed construction plans that were not
Proposed,
approved,
okay.
that were showing a detention in the tree preservation area. And I redlined that and said that can't go in there.
Can't do that.
The red line was in the planning and zoning office, not at the courthouse.
Which I think that certificate I talked about earlier would possibly help prevent this in the future, which I think we need to start doing. So, here's this, pass this down. Thank you, Mr. Charles.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you have to come back up to the microphone, please.
guys are debating or contemplating, how did it get missed? How did this happen? Approved preliminary plans is a matter of due diligence would be one of my first moves. If something has already been zoned and a preliminary plan already exists, neighborhood is surrounding a piece of property, you might want to find out what that consists of and look at all of the notes and all of the details that are on that preliminary plan, because it is something that was publicly met on. There was public feedback. Planning Commission considered all of the things that were needing to be considered and then said, yes, that's good. So the fact that it's not at the courthouse is not unusual, but to take a quick visit to the Planning Commission and talk to the staff there would have, in my opinion, been something that you would do prior to buying the property. So,
Mr. Hamill,
Yeah.
let me ask you one quick question. You mentioned something, and let me clarify this in my mind. You talked about moving some of the restricted area from one area to another. What did you mean by that?
well, simply stating that if you've cut down, 75 or 17 trees
Yeah.
that are seasoned, and you're proposing to replace them with trees that are much smaller. and
New, yeah.
May or may not survive. A percentage of them may or may not survive. And you've got stands of trees that are still standing there right now. You could say, well, those are established and they're not going anywhere, so why don't we revise the plan and cordon off an area that hasn't been touched?
You brought that up and nobody has addressed that, Joe or the developer. Is that a reasonable thing to do?
I don't have enough information to know where those trees are exactly in relation to the lot, the buildable areas in the lot, so we have to postpone to go look.
And I know there are two different buyers here, and that's unfortunate. From strictly looking at it, at the facts, it's an development plan. So it's unfortunate there are two buyers,
Mr. Charles?
I might add that since this whole revision process, we did increase the tree preservation area another, 6/10 of an acre or so?
Yeah.
Than what was originally called for. So we have expanded the tree preservation area beyond what it was, to his point.
If it was moved, Mr. Charles, wouldn't that come up into a bunch of the lots that's got platted?
It did. We cut the lots back and lengthened it in the depth and the width to do that.
What he was saying though, if we moved the tree preservation area to what's still standing now, where would that come into your lots? Can you kind of show me that?
Where they moved it, the trees are still standing. The new area.
What he's proposing is move it even further.
I think,
Is that not, am I not
I
understanding?
showed it that some areas that I knew hadn't been touched, I kind of highlighted it there on that overhead of the image.
Oh, it's going around.
Yeah, back down that way.
How many acres were cut? You added 6/10, you said. How much of an acre was actually cut?
How much of?
6/10?
I don't know really what was, I just know we did an inventory on the trees that were cut and species and all that kind of thing. I don't know the exact what it was and what it is.
But we took the area that was cut and added just 6/10, would that be about the same as it was before it was cut? And we're back to.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're back about even.
Yes.
So this is where this is right here. Where you got, standing back here. That's regular. That's right there. Can see that.
I would mention too, there are probably some trees that need to be cut. If they're ash trees and they're gonna die and fall into somebody's house and they're on the edge of the property, then they probably do need to come down, the same way with other trees.
Still-
But I guess the question is, how do you come up with a compromise between, some of these oak trees might be 150, 200 years old. If they're still healthy, and it is nice to preserve those things, that's kind of a landmark in that area. I know that it's difficult to preserve them at times because of changes in elevation, moving dirt, but we have looked at possibilities of trying to preserve some of those really nice trees that stand out, way beyond others in the area. And I'm sure a lot of developers would try to preserve them as well, if it didn't completely change the layout.
Does anyone else want to speak? Mr. Haddock, did you swear in, Mr. Haddock? Charlie, did you swear, Mr. Haddock?
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make with the truth, to the best of your information and belief?
I do. I'm Paul Haddix. I'm the purchaser of Phase 2, 3-A, the 5.95 acre, the future 28 lot. And I guess, for the record, I purchased mine before Mr. Charles did, and totally independently. And I guess I know it's been presented to the staff as a whole, which was the preliminary development plan is as a whole. But also for the record, in your decision making, we are trying to do it together, but as they say, it could be timing, where he might do it before I, or I might do it before him. So I just want, for the record, any decision making, that it doesn't affect my piece. If it's, negative in any way, I want to, if it gets delayed for whatever reason, and I choose to want to start developing my tract, that I should have permission to do so.
Have you already closed on this?
I've closed, yes. I closed actually before Mr. Charles has.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Haddock? You're aware of the big oak tree they're talking about that's on your property?
No, was that? No, I'm not. Was that preserved? Is that a recorded tree that needs to be preserved?
Not the way it looks like it's. You want to see this? The way it looks like it's going to be probably on these lots right here. Yeah. That's it, right there.
Oh. Well, for the record, also, I build a lot of homes in Mallard Point in Victoria Estates that have big trees on the lot that you got to clear out for the house. So it's unfortunate, but hate, and I have a practice of clearing trees only what I need to clear to build a house. But that would be a case where that's where a house has to go.
You'll do your best to try to save that picture.
I'll do my very best.
Matt or Joe, did you see on this diagram or on your plat where that big oak tree fell in? Because I thought we talked about it Monday a little bit. Did we not? Is it close to being on, or at the very back end of one of those lots? You weren't? Okay.
I've seen it. I don't know. I have no idea where it's located in relation, except for it's in that first part. Maybe Mark could tell us where it's at.
You want your picture back?
Here's a picture of the tree. See how big it is?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big tree. And
looks like it might be
It
right
seems
in
to
here
me
somewhere.
That if you look at this,
That should be here, right?
yep. So if I had to guess, that tree is somewhere.
So it might be okay then, possibly.
Especially if it's right on the line.
That's what I'm wondering. That's what I thought could be right in there. Okay.
I hope it is.
Okay.
So it might be all right.
So it's actually gonna be almost in between you two guys, maybe.
So it's on Mr. Charles's property and not
Maybe.
Paul's.
I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, I think my property, the line should end right at the back of the lot lines there.
Yeah.
All right.
If it's here, it's on the Doug Charles property.
Yeah.
If it's there in that location, it can stay.
What if it's in the way?
I can't.
Mr. Charles, come back up here to the microphone, please. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. If it's on one of your two lots right there, or three lots, whatever it is, I'd like to see that tree stay. And if it's in the way of a house, the house has to go.
I think
Be
it
shortened
looks.
or something.
Huh?
The house could be shortened
Yeah.
or something. If it's
I mean,
smaller
I'd
house,
I'd like to see
If
the
it's on
tree
my,
stay.
if it's from my standpoint, if it's in where they're saying it is, I think we can work around that.
Just-
you know. I don't
Man.
know how that relates into what I don't know is how that relates into the grading, the overall grading plan of the adjoining areas. I don't know. I just haven't looked at it from that perspective.
Where I'm at with it, if it's on your property, I want the tree to stay no matter what.
Okay,
That's where I'm at with it right now.
all right.
And then I'll agree with the other tree plantings, and
Right.
we can move on. If it's on your lot. If it's not, then
Okay.
Figure it out.
Same thing with Mr. Haddix. It's
Well-
on his lot.
I'm not gonna tell Mr. Haddix he has to save that tree when he didn't do anything wrong yet anyway, so.
Gotcha.
It's kinda hard to penalize him, you
Yeah.
know?
I heard him say
I mean,
yeah.
I
too.
hate to say penalize you,
Fair enough.
but I feel like you should have knew better than to
Fair
go in there
enough,
and
fair
start
enough.
tearing these trees out. So, I'll make that motion that we accept the conditions of approval, add another item as, the big tree, the big oak tree, whether it be there on lots, whatever it is. Up in there, 4950, somewhere in that neighborhood, it's probably located. If it's in those lots, that tree has to stay, can't not be disturbed.
How can we describe the tree?
The big tree.
Is it the largest oak tree? It's the largest oak tree in the development?
I guess that's the way it sounds. Do you know, Mr. Charles?
I know there's still some big timber in there, you know, but it's a big, it
Can
is
we
a
get
big.
Ben or Perry or somebody to go out and mark that tree?
You do?
I don't know where it's located.
And mark that tree.
Well, but it'll be if it's on
Tag
Mr.
it
Charles'
somehow or
property.
another.
It's hard to miss.
That big, Any more questions from the audience?
Mark, do you happen to know if that's the largest tree on this development?
It is.
Well, I'll take your word for it.
And that's fair enough.
Is that fair enough?
Hmm?
I should have asked, is there any more in the audience that would like to speak on this? If not, I want to make that motion. Or, do you have something else, Mr. Wiseman?
Motion to keep big tree?
Yeah. So we'll add that on the,
Added as number 11, recommendation to keep the big tree.
yes, number 11. Tree. Keep big tree. And I'd also like to add number 12. We need to set a deadline on planting of the trees.
I thought, Mr. Chairman, if we could, we'd add that to the end of number 3 where it says what they're gonna plant.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that'd
we'll
be
just
fine.
say these plantings will take place, I guess, the fall of 2018.
Yeah. Is that okay with me, Mr. Charles?
Mr. Charles, did you say fall of 18 or fall of 19? When you wanted to plant those trees? Remember you mentioned the end of this year?
Yeah, this coming fall.
Okay.
Yeah, fall.
All right.
And the new trees have to be in by
Place
fall
By fall of this year.
2018.
With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to approve PSP 2018-16, with the addition to number 3, to save the big tree.
Well,
Plant the-
excuse me, adding to number 3, just the
Just
trees
planting.
required under number 3 to be planted fall of 2018.
And then we're doing 11 to
And then
save the
11 is
tree.
going to say to preserve the largest oak
Thanks,
tree
Shirley.
in this development if it's on Mr. Charles' property.
Yep.
Right. I second.
Motion by Mr. Solsky, a second by Ms. Mizell. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion approved. Come up, sign your paper.
Do we want to break before the cell tower? Ask Mr. Wiseman. Do you want to break before the cell tower?
Don't care.
No, let's,
Keep moving. I
yeah,
know.
yeah, let's move on.
Okay.
Keep going, sir. Nope, stay in order. Stay in order.
Our next application will be PDP 2018-17, Minersville Wireless Communications Facility. This is a preliminary development plan for a 199-foot monopole telecommunications tower located on a 10,000 square foot lease area located at 2475 Miners Branch Road. Michaela?
All right. Like you said, this is a preliminary development plan for a 199-foot monopole telecommunications tower. It'll be 190 feet tall, 195 feet tall, with a 4-foot lightning arrestor on top for a total of 199 feet. It'll be located at 2475 Miners Branch Road. They'll be leasing a 10,000 square foot area on a 29-acre parent tract. It's zoned A1 agricultural. All the surrounding zones are also zoned A1 agricultural. The first thing that you would look at with a cell tower is if the applicant attempted to co-locate. They did do their due diligence and hand in documentation that they proved that there is no more suitable location reasonably available and that there is no reasonably available opportunity to locate its antennas on existing structure. Therefore, there's no more suitable location reasonably available to provide adequate service to this area. They found no other suitable towers that they could attempt to co-locate on, and the proposed tower will be able to accommodate 3 additional service providers, which we do require. So this is just an overview of the setbacks and where the tower will be located on the parent tract. I know this is a little difficult to see, sorry. It's going to be 950 feet approximately from Miners Branch Road, 250 feet approximately from that eastern property line. 505 feet from the eastern property line, 250 feet from the western property line, and then about 650 feet from the rear of the property. For our required setbacks for something like this would be 150 feet, so they are meeting all our setback requirements. This is just an overview of the site plan. Again, sorry, I can see that this is a little difficult to read. They are meeting our landscaping requirements. As you can see here, they'll be meeting our plantings within our landscape buffer area. They are proposing an 8-foot high chain link fence, which we also require. They'll be meeting the spacing for the access area. We have a maximum of 15 feet allowed. They've only proposed 12 feet. They're proposing a 25-foot access easement for utilities and access with a 12-foot gravel drive. Gravel is allowed for something of this use unless the Planning Commission feels that something more would be needed. With that being said, we are recommending approval based on the fact that they've met all our requirements and that there was no reasonable location for co-location or something.
Michaela, has anybody got any questions for Michaela?
Joe, why couldn't this have gone consent?
It requires a public hearing.
There you go. 'Cause
So it is a public hearing?
Yes.
So
It
we opened the
requires-
public hearing when you started speaking.
Oh. Did you do that?
Let everybody know. For the record.
That's why. I knew there was a reason.
The applicant?
That was a priceless inflection, Mr. Chairman. Having listened to, well, first of all, for the recorded record, my name is David Pike. I'm a principal with Pike Legal Group, PLLC, P.O. Box 369, Shepherdsville, Kentucky. It is a pleasure to appear before you again. I have heard a certain level of sentiment among members of the Commission for an expedited evening, if possible. As you would probably expect, I have come forearmed with my PowerPoint and hearing binders to distribute. However, it occurs to me, I know there are a number of people in the audience here tonight who are here in support of this project. Mr. Chairman, would it be possible for the chair to inquire if there is anyone here in opposition before I begin?
I was going to ask you the same thing. Is anyone here
Great minds on a similar path.
Is anyone here opposed to this application? Okay. Well,
Okay,
we'll let
so
you do your presentation.
in that case, it will take just a moment. Let me distribute hearing binders, if I could, and PowerPoint.
Should we maybe listen to her opposition? Is that out of order, Charlie?
Not particularly, although.
I mean, it might be a question
Although his
she had.
presentation might raise other questions for her.
Okay.
So you might, if you hear her arguments first, that's fine, but then give her a shot, then you get back up after David has done.
I'll
his
try to be
presentation.
expeditious, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
I'll do my best.
Thank you,
but,
Mr. Pike.
We gave it a shot. Okay, that's just what I screwed up. So now fix it if you will, since we're in the problem. So show me which Got it. Make sure Mr. Perkins gets one.
Oh, thank you very much.
He's been waiting for this. Okay, everyone have a hearing binder at this juncture? Okay, very good. In that case, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll go ahead and begin my presentation. Let's see, just a couple of things that I want to do up front here. First, I, of course, want to thank your planning staff for their very thorough review. We're gratified that they, of course, find that we meet all of your regulatory requirements and all state requirements. And in fact, we do a lot better than that, with extraordinary levels of setbacks associated with this site, far in excess of what is required under your regulations. The fact that we meet every technical requirement is not by accident. It's based on the fact that we take your regulations seriously, and we're grateful for the time and effort that your staff has spent answering our questions to make sure that we were in full compliance prior to filing. I also want to take just a moment to introduce our property owners who are here this evening. Mike Randolph, if you could raise your hand, and Debbie Randolph and their daughter Michelle Randolph is here as well. To answer any additional questions that may go beyond those that I'm able to field, since they obviously know more about their property than anyone does. A copy of this presentation is filed at record in the exhibit binder that I previously submitted. Your planning staff's done a good job of talking about our basic proposal. A couple of things to note, of course, this is a monopole type tower, not self-support and not a guide tower. It is also, since we can meet our service objectives at just below 200 feet, has been configured in that fashion, which means that this tower does not have to be lit for aviation purposes, and we've, of course, filed those waivers from both the Federal Aviation Administration and the Kentucky Airport Zoning Commission of record in this proceeding. One thing that was not highlighted by your staff that I think is worth highlighting here is that it is over 724 feet to the nearest residence, and that's tough to achieve in a county as densely populated as this. And we can't always do it, but when we can, we're gratified to. And that is the home that is located on this tract. The next closest home that is not owned by the property owners is over 1,200 feet from this location, which I think may be a record for a cell tower application that's been proposed before this Planning Commission. I've done a few of them with you. Our radio frequency need is exhibited at tab B. I think there are multiple people here tonight who will tell you just how bad it is. And if you have tried to make a call in this area, I'm not sure an expert report is needed, but of course we filed one documenting the fact that this is a chronically underserved area for multiple providers. Of course, this is a picture of what our current coverage looks like, where green is what we want to try to achieve. This is what it will look like afterwards if we are fortunate enough to receive your approval here this evening. Of course, we've looked carefully for co-location alternatives. As I've echoed previously, one of the greatest misconceptions by the general public is that we like to propose new towers. It is always a joy to appear here in Georgetown. However, I would be somewhere else with a glass of wine right now if this was not required. Because if we could co-locate on an existing structure, no Planning Commission review is required or allowed, and all we would do is get an electrical permit and proceed. Here, there are no alternatives in the vicinity, which means that this tower, with its multiple additional co-location options, opens the door not just for this carrier, but for other carriers to potentially improve their quality of service in the vicinity. In order to rectify our service deficiencies, it has to be located within a search area, a copy of which we've included at tab C of the binder that we've distributed. And of course, we documented the efforts that we went through to find a site, and your staff has already indicated that they believe there is no better reasonably alternative site. Trying again to be expeditious here, folks. Our county tower map is included at tab D. Tower and foundation design is included at tab E. Important to note that this tower is built to a higher level of structural integrity than that which is required by either local, state, or federal standards. This is a so-called zero fall zone tower, so that even when fully loaded, the result is that if there was a catastrophic event that was sufficient to cause it to fail, it's engineered about 2/3 of the way up to crumple, bending so that it never falls to the ground, meaning that there is a zero fall zone radius. As the way one engineer that I think previously appeared before this commission put it, that in the event that anything did occur which would cause this tower to fall, there would be nothing left for it to fall onto, since at the end of the day this is engineered to a higher standard than any other type of construction, any other type of building in the county, period. A geotechnical report is included at Exhibit D. Of course, that's necessary for us to develop our tower and foundation drawings and required by both state law and your local regulations. Floodplain information is included at tab A. As you can see, we are not included in the floodplain. Tower height. This is, I think, something worth noting. It is not included in our application materials, but is included in your binder at tab F. There are currently 23 FCC registered constructed towers within Scott County. There are no towers shorter than this one. Let me repeat that. No towers shorter than this one. 21 of the 23 registered constructed towers are taller. And it's a significant difference. The average height of towers that are currently registered and constructed is 279 feet. That's over 80 feet taller than our proposal. Now, I'm not suggesting this is a short structure. It is not. But by cell tower standards, this is equal to the shortest tower that you've ever approved and considered. And again, we can accomplish our service goals with this, and with the additional elevation that we got by going further into the property, we thought that was the responsible course of action. We've met all your notice requirements. Of course, you have very able legal counsel, and you should certainly listen to his interpretation of the law in all matters coming before you. I do want to take a couple of minutes to point out our view of what the federal law is, because I think that's incumbent on us, since these cases are radically different from any other type of case that you will consider, since it is governed by a separate set of state statutes and by the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. First of all, your own zoning requirements are an example of substantial compliance, and it's uncontroverted that we meet all of those requirements. And based on federal court decisions within the Sixth Circuit that we are a part of, a cell tower application can only be disapproved based on substantial evidence. The courts have viewed that the following things specifically are not substantial evidence and cannot serve as a basis for cell tower disapproval. Lay opinion cannot. Unsupported opinion, the classic example being, here's what I found on the internet yesterday. Generalized expression of concerns with aesthetics cannot serve as a basis for a cell tower disapproval. Claims that a tower is unsightly, so claims that it's ugly or unwanted near a residence are not sufficient. Because ultimately otherwise, as the federal courts find, there would be no new cell towers since anyone could voice that same objection. Also, of course, it's important to note that you can't take actions which would have the effect of discriminating or prohibiting the provision of wireless service. And finally, it is a matter of both state and federal law that arguments concerning alleged health effects or radiation effects associated with cell towers cannot be considered by this commission, and I would argue should not be allowed to be voiced before this commission as being violative of the terms of those statutes. We meet all the terms of your regulations. These applications are also different because we are a registered utility and get special status based upon that, since we are specifically registered with the Kentucky Public Service Commission. Now, home stretch. And this is a record for me getting through this quickly, I think. At tab G, you will see a report from the Federal Communications Commission showing that now over 70% of all emergency calls in this country are made from wireless devices. That's 70%. Now hold that statistic in mind and take a look at tab H, which is one of my favorite federal government work products, if there is such a thing. Every year, an allied group of federal health agencies, including the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, and allied public health agencies, conduct the nation's most comprehensive study of how people communicate. Now, the reason that they have to do that is because, as public health agencies, most of the information that they utilize for public health protection is obtained through random samples and surveys. They have to know how people communicate in order to make sure they have a random sample and that the results they're getting are not biased in some fashion, either based on demographics, sexual orientation, or any other factor. I have watched these statistics climb every year I've practiced. Last year, we crossed 2 critical thresholds. The first one, as of June in last year, over half of all adults in this country now live in a home which does not have a landline phone. Over half. And over 60% of all children live in homes just like that. Now, think about the previous slide that I showed you, which showed that over 70% of all emergency calls are made from wireless phones, and remember what that projection of coverage looked like in this area. In some cases, non-existent, with virtually no in-building coverage as we are now. And remember that if we're fortunate enough to receive your approval, and that area is depicted as green, we will have coverage that is reliable first time, every time in building, which is exactly what we should be striving to achieve. Now, of course, I've also included this slide that shows the phenomenal growth in wireless needs in this country. No other company anywhere has to, and industry anywhere has to deal with demands on our services that are increasing by as much as 50% per year. And we're working very hard, spending billions of dollars to try to do that. This site is an example of that commitment, not just in heavily served areas, but in the least well-served areas of your community. Now, there are 2 issues I do want to take just a moment to discuss. And those are new services which are going to be built into this site. And they're some of the first sites in the state that are going to receive these services. The initial one is FirstNet, talked about at tab B of the materials that I've distributed to you. After the terrorist attacks of 9/11, a presidential commission was put together to try to come up with ways in which the country could better deal with the aftermath of those issues in the future and be able to prevent them when possible. One of the key recommendations of that presidential commission all those years ago was to develop a unified communication system that was secure, accessible by all emergency response personnel, that was scalable and dedicated. By that I mean one of the lessons of 9/11 was that when when emergency personnel tried to use wireless systems after the terrorist attacks, they were essentially locked out because everyone was trying to call. It has taken the federal government this long, but they developed a standard, and last year they awarded one company the right to operate that system, and it's AT&T. And Kentucky has specifically opted into that system for participation. This site will be one of the first ones deployed in the state that incorporates that newest technology. The second one is fixed wireless local loop. Now, in addition to in this vicinity and in other rural areas of your community, you having difficulty with poor wireless cell coverage, you also have chronically underserved areas in terms of high-speed internet. Either poor performance, high prices, or a combination of both, and there being no competitors even when there is a provider. We will be deploying at this site and at other rural sites within your community, but certainly this one, from the very first day that we open, our fixed wireless local loop service, which allows you to place a small panel antenna about so large on your home or business. You become our subscriber, and we provide you with high-speed internet service at your locality, bypassing the need for construction of fiber optics, a host of other stuff. Now, this does not get the same speed that you would get with full-fledged fiber optics cable, but it's fully comparable to most cable services. And we think we will bring a radically new competitive environment to this area and to others. And in some areas of the state, which the state government has struggled for decades to try to provide high-speed internet service to, specifically in eastern Kentucky, we think we have the answer. Not the full answer, but more answer than has ever been offered in those areas of the state. And we'll be deploying that here from day one. A copy of my presentation is included at tab J. At this juncture, what I'd like to do is to introduce a copy of the hearing binder. Mr. Perkins, if we can designate yours or one of the other people's, cumulatively as an exhibit in this proceeding, I'd like to do so. And of course, all copies of all prior materials that we have submitted in connection with this case as part of the record. We have every other approval we need for this site, and these sites are all slated for construction within the next 12 months. We're excited about it. We need your approval to move forward, and hopefully that met the dual goal of being thorough but also getting it done quicker than usual. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Pike, other than the fact he's putting pressure on us?
Thank you, Mr. Pike.
Thank you.
You want to come on?
My name is Pamela Lay. I own the property that's next to this property and then the one that's across from the road from it. One of the properties that's across the road from it. The first thing I want to point out is that the house that's on the property is not, nobody lives in it. They live 3 miles down the road. So of course they'd have no problem with it being built there. The reason I live where I live is because it's off the grid. I like it. We get low traffic. It's good for my 3 kids. I'm a widow with 3 kids. I moved down there to let my kids get away from all the crap that's in town, basically. I know they keep saying, well, it's our job. We're trying to cover the grid. We're trying to give you these things. But if we don't want them, like that's going in the air above my house and above my land. I don't, if I'm not asking for it, I don't want it. They asked me about it. I told them I didn't want it. They asked another neighbor. Everybody else has said they didn't want it. That's their due diligence, and they couldn't find another spot as nobody else would say yes. I don't know. I have other things, but they said I wasn't allowed to say them or whatever. So my other thing is the proximity to the Owen County line. I don't know if that issues into anything because my back property line is Owen County. And then also the proximity to the game reserve that's owned by the state. It's really close to it, so I didn't know if there was issues with that maybe that they're not looking at because it's not presented on any maps.
I don't think there's anything in question there. As far as the proximity, I don't think there is.
Okay, because they just expanded the game preserve to come onto Miners Branch, so they have a big restoration project going on.
How is your cell phone usage where you currently live? I mean, is it pretty?
I have Sprint, but it works.
Does it? Well.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any questions for?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pike, could you respond? Real
I'm
quick.
not sure any response is necessary. I think that helps make my case, frankly. It indicates that we did our due diligence in regarding selecting alternative sites. Probably the only thing I would indicate is I think this commission is aware this is the lowest possible trip generator. Once we've completed this site and have constructed it, the norm is 1 truck visiting per month, and a single-family residence would top that before noon.
How would that compare with like a regular?
Can you have to come back up to that.
How would they compare that with their regular like landline poles? Because I have a landline pole on my property that is visited probably once a week at least.
Yeah, he just stated that it would probably be visited once a month. This site would probably be visited once a month.
I'm just saying, like, there's an AT&T pole now there, and they don't like they don't take care of the road. They throw their trash down whenever they're there working on it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to speak? Yes, sir. Come up.
My name's David Coyle. I live at 1215 Miners Branch. I'm on the list there. I've lived on this road all my life. My dad lives across the road and down about a quarter of a mile from where the site is. My grandparents used to own this land. We need cell phone service. We get nothing. She talks about living off the grid. She's got Sprint. She evidently is on the grid, but we're off the grid and we don't want to be. We need the internet service to be able to work at home. I'm a consultant. I get minimal coverage around where I live, but it's a high-price satellite. This should help that tremendously. And where my dad lives, no cell phone service at all. It's badly needed for the people up and down this road. She said everybody turned down the site. I don't think he was ever asked, or he'd be here wanting it on his backyard. So that's all I got.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name's Sally Thornsberry. I live on 1609 Miners Branch Road. I too was not ever asked about a cell tower, or I would have said yes. I work for the state of Kentucky. I work in IT. I work in technology, and I live in an area that I cannot utilize technology currently, and that is a problem. I actually do disaster recovery for the state. There are many times in the middle of the night I need to be contacted. I can't. I have to keep a landline for that purpose. And I have to give that landline number to everyone in the executive cabinet so when we do testing. That's crazy. That is absolute craziness in this day and age that we don't have that capability. Not to mention from the personal standpoint, when someone comes to see you, they get lost, because you will get lost down there. We got a lot of oak trees. And they can't even call you to find you. They have to go all the way back out to call you, to find where you're at. You spoke about EMS and emergency responders and the cell network being dedicated. There's also problems when emergency responders can't find your house. They can't call you back. They have to turn around and go back, and we've had that incident happen. We've had to literally go out and stand by the road and flag them down. So being off the grid is one thing. You don't have to sign up for it. You can be off the grid, but don't keep it from the rest of us that want to be. And that's all I want to say.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a short story for you. My name is Ron. We live at 2870 Miners Branch, about 2 miles down from this proposed site. There have been several times when our hard line has gone out. About a mile down the road, halfway in between us, AT&T has one of those little white green boxes. For some reason, the county mowers keep hitting it. We've been out 2, 3, sometimes 4 days without AT&T. A few months back, my wife, who was severely diabetic, had a seizure. She was flopping around on the floor. Luckily, nobody hit the green box, so I called and they came out from stamping ground. Now, normally I get at best one bar, but usually my cell phone says searching for service. If AT&T hadn't been available that day, Roberta might not be with us tonight. Enough said.
Thank you, sir. Is anyone else?
I just want to say for the record, I think this is the first time Mr. Pike's had anybody in favor of a cell tower.
It is my hope this is not a sign of the end times being upon us.
I'll have to agree. You know, I live in Stamping Ground. I go out to this area often. The wildlife management area is a recreational site. There are a lot of people that visit that site. If somebody did get hurt down in there, they wouldn't get out. If they got a cell phone with this tower down here, they're gonna be able to call out, so. I think this cell tower's needed.
Looks like it covers about a 2-mile radius.
Yeah. That's what it would cover, right,
Two and a
Mr.
half.
Pike, is like a 2-mile radius or so.
Actually, for voice, we'll go better than that. We don't, I mean, we get better service within that area. We'll go further than that on voice. The wireless local loop perimeter is approximately 2.5-mile radius from this location.
And just to make it clear, that is way further than the one they just built in Stamping Ground at
Yes.
Schweitzer Road.
Yeah.
So that's what, 14 miles down the road, I think, from Stamping Ground.
A
Close
third
to it.
piece, yes, sir.
So Shannon Lady here has a question, I think.
So if it's only a,
You gotta come up.
Yes, ma'am.
so if it's only a 2.5 miles from the people at the end of Myers Branch, is it gonna reach their house?
Tell her to stay.
Let me make sure I'm distinguishing, if I
Yes.
can respond now. The 2.5-mile radius is the radius for our wireless local loop service. That's the portion of this that would provide high-speed internet service directly to a home or to a business. The actual voice service will be significantly greater than that. Now, we get our best service within about 2.5 miles, but the actual voice service will go much further than that. I can't tell you exactly how much, but significantly further. The reason the wireless local loop is effectively limited to about 2.5 miles or 5 miles across is we use a different batch of dedicated spectrum that we purchase nationally. It's higher frequency, which is great because it carries data really well, but it does not propagate as far. So we're limited by the laws of physics.
Does that answer your question?
Probably, and I'm probably the closest house to the tower, so.
Okay.
Did you want to have her state her
I
name
want
and
the service, but
address?
not the actual.
Could you state your name and address?
No, Julie Wash, 2446 Miners Branch Road. And no, there's no cell service there, and I've just had to call the Public Service Commission for the landline, which is working now. So until we get that in there, if y'all call the Public Service Commission, I can fix your landline. But yeah, so it will have, nice to have service, but I'm used to seeing trees and nothing else. So it is, and it is gonna be straight across my driveway, but I guess that's a progress.
Thank you, ma'am.
I just have one
Ms. Sally.
question. In conjunction with what he was saying, that, you know, the radius is 2.5 miles, is there other technologies that an individual could utilize, like the micro cell towers and things like that within their home to increase that bandwidth that they might receive the wireless?
As a practical matter, probably not for the actual high speed. Now, again, for voice and for the use of your phone and data on your phone, we will cover a significantly bigger area than that. But for our actual wireless local loop service, about 2.5 miles is about the effective limit of that. And again, it's based on the dedicated spectrum we're using. This actually has a separate set of antennas for that sole purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Pike. Does anyone else have any comments? Any further discussion?
What I'd like to do is thank Mr. Pike for his presentation. Very thorough. Very impressed with your fan club out here, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Solsky. I got a second by Mr. Wiseman.
Okay.
Second by Mr. Wiseman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion approved.
On behalf of my clients and our customers, thank you very much. And with your permission, my father had a great saying. He says, on those occasions when you win, leave immediately before anyone changes their mind. Thank you very
You
much.
need to sign your paper.
Yeah, he'll sign.
Yeah. Don't leave immediately, you gotta sign something first.
Y'all need to take a quick break.
Ask Mr. Wiseman.
You need to take a quick break, Mr.
No, get this
We're,
done.
we're gonna take like 5 minutes real quick.
Something to drink. We'll be right back. Oh, I can grab something to drink.
I almost booked your present today.
Well, you need it? Oh, I'm sorry.
18 Pleasant Valley Townhomes Condominiums, preliminary development plan for residential development of 166 units, multifamily condominiums, and 4 single-family lots located on Snyder Boulevard.
Thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned, this is a preliminary development plan. There's also kind of a preliminary subdivision plat sort of packaged in with it, since they are proposing single-family homes and multifamily homes. And as you mentioned, they are proposing 166 condominium units and 4 single-family units. If you recall, last fall, this area was rezoned from R1C PUD to R2 PUD. So the main difference there is that it went from a single-family zoning district to our medium-density zoning district, which does allow for some higher density units, in this case, condo units. All of the surrounding property is zoned R1C PUD, so that single-family designation. And as far as the acreage of the site, there are 16.3 total acres on this site. The net acreage on the site, which is what we'll base the density on and the number of dwelling units that they're allowed, is 14.2 acres. And so the difference there is just we remove the amount of proposed right-of-way from that to get that net acreage. So with the 170 total dwelling units that they're proposing and the net acreage remaining, they're at about 11.97 dwelling units per net acre. The maximum that we would allow for this zoning district is 12, so they are underneath that maximum. This is just for some perspective as far as where this project is located. This is Schneider Boulevard here, extending to the north. And then this is the project site here, extending all the way down to their border with Cherry Blossom, which is down here to the south. You can kind of see the golf course a little bit in the aerial. So as indicated earlier, this is an R2 zoned property, and all the surrounding zones are that single-family zoning designation. To the west here, there is a drainage area that was taken over or given to the city. I'm not sure which way that went, but the city does own this property directly adjacent to the west. The applicant is currently working, I believe, on finishing out this section of the single-family homes on Pleasant Valley. And then to the east, there are proposed dwelling units as well that have received preliminary approval from the Planning Commission, and Schneider Boulevard eventually will come down and connect to that neighboring development. So this is, I've kind of cropped out some of the extra space, but this is a look at the area the applicant is looking to develop. Before I get into that, just as a little bit of additional background, as I've noted here in the staff report, there were a couple of concerns from when this property was had its zone change approved, and I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned those. First, the applicant did pledge at that meeting that these would not be apartment units, and then the second being that they were limited at that time to constructing a maximum of 82 dwelling units until such time as they had a second way in and out of that neighborhood, or development rather. Okay, so as far as the not being apartments, the applicant is proposing condo units. They've indicated on the development plan and in their application that's what these will be. And in the staff report, I did include how we define condominium units, and I believe at least at this time the applicant is proposing to meet that definition. As far as the 82 dwelling units, they've also indicated on their preliminary development plan that they do intend to continue to comply with that regulation. So they are aware that that is still something that they'll have to comply with, and they're not proposing to alter that. So looking at the site and what their development plan looks like, I've kind of highlighted in blue up here. This is an area that they've labeled as a stream protection area. As you can, it's kind of hard to see on here, but it's on the site plan that you have in your packet. They've kind of lightly drawn in where the existing single-family homes are. to the north. So these are the existing single-family homes in Pleasant Valley. So there will be this stream protection area between those existing lots and anything that the applicant does creates. The next thing, is that they've got these 4 single-family lots configured here between that stream protection area and this yellow area. This yellow area is 100-foot wide overhead electric utility easement that's owned by that KU has on this property. There are electric lines that run through this area, and so they have excluded that area also from their proposed development, and should remain. It will likely remain untouched. It's possible that area could be in future included as some sort of recreational or just maintained open space area, but they're not proposing any buildings or anything of that nature in this area. They are showing Schneider Boulevard, as I mentioned before, kind of coming down along the eastern part of the property, and they are showing it stubbing out into the next into that neighboring property, and from there they have an entrance proposed to their condominium units. Units, I didn't really know the best way to describe it. It's generally triangular shaped, but all of the units, are sort of on the exterior for the most part of the development. That'll help to screen any of the parking areas from neighboring properties, which sort of prevents, the residences to the north and the golf course to the south from basically looking at the property and just seeing a vast parking lot of some kind. The applicant is proposing also a second entrance down here to the south, and they have set aside some property for a future extension of Lexus Way. I believe it's about 90 feet wide. As far as other considerations with the layout, we discussed at workshop the fact that the applicant is only showing 2 dumpster locations on the site, and at workshop they indicated that they were going to work with their engineer to try to identify some additional sites. I think that's fine, and we can make sure we can analyze those, I guess, a bit closer if this plan is approved at the final development plan stage. The other layout consideration that came up during workshop sort of centered around this landscaping island between these 2 rows of parking spaces, and the applicant was agreeable to potentially removing some of those parking spaces in order to allow a gap for traffic to maybe come through, possibly in this area here. It would just kind of make things easier for people who might purchase units in this development to prevent them from having to do a lot of extra driving through the area. And the applicant, as they indicated at workshop, would try to make sure that was also in compliance with safe pedestrian access to and from vehicles and things of that nature. As far as pedestrian access, the applicant is showing, although I didn't include it here, they did include a cross-section for Schneider Boulevard that did include sidewalks on both sides. And then internally in the development, there are sidewalks along the parking lots and leading to the individual units. So there is sufficient pedestrian accessibility throughout. What you see here on this plan for each of the units shows 4 dwelling units with the numbers inside of those indicating the number of bedrooms that will be in each unit. So what the applicant is going to do if this plan is approved and they move through their final development plan is that each of these will be 2-story buildings, and so there will be 4 units on the first floor, which is kind of what you see here, and then there will be a second set of 4 units on the second floor. So each building would have 8 total units. There's something there that does require a variance from our regulations. The R2 zoning district currently allows up to 6 dwelling units per building. The applicant with this proposal is requesting 8. I think that's a reasonable request. If we held them to 6, what would what would likely happen in order for them to meet, in order for them to get the same number of dwelling units, would mean that they would have to expand their development to a larger area on this site, which might potentially result in the removal of the 4 single-family dwelling units and possibly some multifamily units being placed in that area. So potentially multifamily units might replace those units or something of that nature. And that would push the multifamily closer to the single-family unit. So I am in support of allowing them to do the 8 units per building. You know, there is some flexibility that's allowed to be granted by the commission with planned unit developments. And so I think that is appropriate for this one. As far as their landscaping, first looking at the property perimeter landscaping, the zoning ordinance or the landscaping ordinance specifically does require that they provide screening from multifamily zones or between multifamily zones and single family zones. You know, that needs to be 1 tree for every 40 feet of boundary plus a continuous 6 foot tall hedge, fence, wall, or earth mound. And so along this southern property line and along the western property line, they are complying with that requirement. Along the eastern boundary, they're proposing to allow the remaining or the existing tree line to serve as that buffer while filling in any gaps as needed. I think I noted in one of my conditions that the applicant should just be aware that they may be required to do more screening, fill in more gaps than they've indicated on this plan. That's just something that we would have to sort of determine with more site visits as they get closer to approval of their final development plan. The waiver that they're requesting for this for the landscaping really deals with their northern property boundary. As you can see, that they are meeting the tree requirement with quite a few trees being proposed in this area between the stream protection area and the Kentucky Utilities easement. But what's not shown here is a hedge, fence, wall, or earth mound. And they're proposing to not include that, and I'm in support of that waiver as well. Sort of the reason being that typically when we require a fence or earth mound, wall, or a hedge in this case, what we're looking to do is provide a solid, almost opaque barrier so that the residential property or the single-family residential property, would be hard pressed to see anything of the multifamily, as long as they're standing in their backyard or in their home. And the conditions with this site, placing a hedge or fence or something in this area would accomplish almost nothing. I was out at the site the other day with Ben and Joe, and we were up here, and the existing vegetation in this stream protection area provides a much better screening than any hedge would provide in that area. And with the addition of new trees in this area, I think that it will suffice for, or it'll do a better job of screening than any hedge would. So I'm in support of that variance as well. As far as other landscaping requirements, they are not required to have any screening of the perimeter of their vehicular use area because, as you can tell, their vehicular use area is almost entirely internal to the site. The buildings that they're proposing are screening that from view of neighboring properties, and any areas that wouldn't be screened by buildings, notably here on the western side, have property perimeter screening already proposed. As far as interior landscaping, they are meeting our requirements, and they are also meeting our canopy requirements. So, with all that, I am recommending approval of their application with the 2 requested waivers. The 11 conditions that are listed in the staff report as well. Noting, yes, they are still, with condition 1, they're still subject to all the conditions from their zone change approval. And condition 2, being that, you know, they may have to fill in some gaps in the landscaping along the eastern boundary a bit more than what they've shown, and that'll just sort of depend on site inspections when they get close to final development plan. And condition 3 being that, you know, the sizes and the shapes of the single-family lots may need to adjust sometime before a final plat recording, although I don't anticipate there being any problems with that because the size lots that they were proposing far exceed our minimum requirements for single-family lots. And that's all that I have.
Any questions for Matt?
Yeah, two simple questions, Matt. Is it customary for the preliminary development plan and the subdivision plat to be on the same application?
That it can be done that way. I would say that it's unusual only in the sense that it's not often that we get that many applications where they're proposing preliminary approval of single-family lots and multifamily units in the same application. Sometimes if there's sort of mixed-use development proposed, they'll bring in separate applications just because the timing of the projects are different. But I think given that this was a large multifamily development and there's just a few single-family lots, I think that's probably why they just showed them both on the same application.
So with that being the case, your recommendation number 11, the preliminary approval is valid for 2 years?
Yes.
Is that,
Yeah, and I guess, so the section or Article 406 is, I forget whether that's specific to development plans or subdivision plats, but there's also Section 305, which applies to the other. That condition, I think, is something that we've started placing in the staff report more as a notice for the applicants. They would be compelled by those whether or not we included them in here or not.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Approximately, how many people would be living here? About 500, I'm figuring. Roughly average 3-bedroom. I thought 2-bedroom average because
Yeah, they had a variety of bedroom sizes.
Its average is look like about what 3 people per condo or something.
Yeah, I was looking at this the other day actually. I want to say that multifamily developments are somewhere around 2.2 people per unit, and then single family units typically are about 2.5 or 2.6, if I'm remembering correctly. Do what?
Roughly 400 or 500 people living in this area.
Yeah, probably about.
Going in and out of Snyder Boulevard, down through Pleasant Valley every day, in and out. I have some of the same concerns here. Our chairman voted against the Jimmy John's because of the extra traffic on Connector. It seemed like this is a similar sort of situation where we're just making not a very safe situation.
This is why, if you recall, at the hearing for the zone change, we restricted them to the 82 dwelling units until there is a second connection. At that time, we did discuss how when you look at the trip generation manual, 82 multifamily units have a similar generate a similar amount of traffic to what was previously approved in single family units. I believe it was around 52 single family units were previously approved for this site. And so that's how we came up with the number, the 82 as the maximum that they can develop until such time as they get a second entrance.
Where would the second entrance be then?
To the south is
Down at the bottom of your plan there, Frank?
Cherry Blossom, Cherry Blossom.
Yeah, the proposed Lexus Way extension would be their second entrance.
Then these people have to go either out Snyder or out this new one through subdivisions that already exist. Traffic in those subdivisions.
Lexus Way.
Yes, I mean if and when Lexus Way gets built, that would be a connection that would take them directly to Cherry Blossom Road. So they wouldn't have to go. They wouldn't have to go through a neighborhood to accomplish that.
Matt, on On the north entrance there,
Mhm.
it shows a sidewalk connecting to Snyder on the northern side of that entrance.
Oh,
But I don't see one on the southern side of that entrance. Am I correct in that? I would think you'd need a sidewalk on both sides. Is that right, Brent? Brent might know.
Yeah, we just thought that one access into the development in general would be enough, but they could certainly put one on both sides. But
I mean,
Snyder will have sidewalks.
That's a
on both
lot
sides.
to have to, I don't know. I just think we'd probably need one on that bottom side, you know, on that southern side of that entrance.
How many people are gonna be walking out there?
Well, there's a lot of people walking that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I'm sure once that's built up, there will be a lot of people walking out through that neighborhood, so.
yeah. And that's something we can make sure that's there on the final development plan.
And then one other thing is the tree line on the eastern side.
Okay,
That is
yeah.
being preserved. How are we gonna make sure that canopy, we're gonna do a canopy count or measurement or something to make sure, so that they don't have to plant the trees and make sure that these, what I'm getting at is I
Yeah.
don't wanna see another Ward Hall situation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, typically what would happen is during construction of the development or prior to construction, they would put fencing around any trees that are intended to be preserved, so that the crews clearing the land would know to not clear those.
Because, you know, somebody else is gonna be developing the other side, and I just worry about that, you
Yeah.
know, happening again. How are we gonna guarantee that those trees aren't gonna?
Has that hasn't been labeled as
No.
tree preservation? Just
No, but
existing
see,
canopy?
if the trees are gone, he's gonna have to put landscaping there, right? If the trees weren't there, he'd have to do landscaping, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
wanna
If
be
the
sure
trees
that
were not if the trees were not there, they would have to do landscaping as they have on the western side of the
I
property.
just don't wanna see the tree, something happen to the trees.
You don't want another lanes run.
Exactly. I mean, how are we gonna guard against that? Is there anything we can do, or?
Verify they're on his property.
Yeah.
If they're off-site, actually off-site, we look at that when we get construction.
Yeah.
Verify.
Cause
Yep.
as close as they've got that set, do they still have room to put trees down through there if they have to? I guess they do,
I think
but
they do.
it's
like
as
they-
close as
about
this
the
other
same
right
distance as
away.
they have on this,
On the southern
on the
side,
southern
right?
border,
I guess the other option would be if if at the time of final development plan, if it's determined that those trees are not on site, we could require them to do the landscaping that they have on the other side as well, just because the screening at that point would essentially be outside of their control.
Do we need to put that in our motion, or in our recommendation, or?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to make sure it's clear, we could maybe add it as a condition.
Does that make sense, Charlie?
Yes, sir, I think so.
How would you word that, Matt? That's the eastern side, right?
Yeah.
existing canopy.
I guess we would just say, maybe just start with the applicant should or shall indicate which trees along the eastern boundary are on their property, and appropriate landscaping screening should be provided in areas that do not have trees under the applicant's control.
Has anybody got any questions for Matt? Anything else? If not, we'll hear from Matt now. Matt. The applicant, here to speak.
Christopher Ferris on behalf of the applicant. Thank you, staff, and employees of the commission. The applicant agrees with the recommendation of the planning staff, and just a few things to add that weren't touched on is, one, when you look at the plan, and one of the keys here, which was mentioned, is the parking is all in the interior. And one issue that was brought up, I believe back in the fall, in addition to parking being on the interior, was the facades of the buildings and a desire to have what you call the front of a facade facing outwards, so you're not looking at the backs of these condominiums. And that's something that we show here on the development plan. If you see the way the buildings are structured, there are units on the interior side and units on the exterior side, and you'll see the sidewalks where people actually have to park, go around into the front of the unit. So I wanted to bring that to the commission's attention. And with respect to the landscaping on the easternmost side, I think that's consistent with condition number 2, which is to provide appropriate screening along the eastern side and working as this progresses, identifying where those areas may be. And again, the applicant's in full agreement with staff recommendations, and I'm happy to answer any questions the commissioners have.
So we did talk about, the parking lot, putting that cut right in the middle of that one side, about that?
Yeah, and I believe there are extra parking spaces on the plan, so that's not going to be an issue.
Okay. And then, like I said, I just asked about the sidewalk.
On the southern side of
the
connection to Schneider.
And then the trees. Anybody else have any questions for the applicant?
I did have one question. If this is only built to 82 units until a second entrance can come about, will the landscaping still be put in for the entire, development, even though only 82 units have been put in? Because I think it's going to look a little strange if we have roads that aren't complete, landscaping around the perimeter that's not complete. I don't know if you have an answer for that or not.
I don't have an answer for that. And I think part of that answer may be depending on where those 82 units are, because there's a significant setback from some of the property lines to where some of the units are. And for example, if they're built on the north side of that lot, that's a significant distance from the southern edge, and with the landscaping there, I think it's kind of on a knob where it may be kind of screened from that side to begin with. But certainly we're open to working with staff as that process, because I don't know what the phasing might look like.
Mine's more of a comment. Just wanted to say thank you for not being as long-winded as Nathan Billings.
Well, after Mr. Pike, who I think may have done this once or twice before, but I'll tell Mr. Billings here. I'll send him your regards.
Oh, I did have one of the Matt's recommendation on breaking up this one parking area. You say you are in agreement with that as well?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I don't know, was that in the conditions or was that just a suggestion?
It's not in the conditions, it's a suggestion, because, technically, what they run and propose doesn't not meet our ordinances, so.
Yeah, but it doesn't flow very well, though.
Yeah.
Nathan said at workshop Monday he was in agreement with that.
No, that's an easy thing to do.
With putting it in
And the
there.
applicant's already has told me that they're okay with that, so.
Good. All right.
Thank you, Brent. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I guess we got to hear from the audience now. Okay, I guess you can go first.
My name's Michael Bradovich. I live on 116 Lanes Run Drive. Rob knows the house. Can I look at the picture that was back?
It kind of showed your house on there a minute ago.
Yeah. The one that's.
Show them where your house is.
I got my glasses on. Who's got the little flicker here? Yeah, once you do this, that's my stepson. He's yeah, 116 Lanes Run.
Yeah, right in there.
Right there. Okay. Here's I'm just trying to get some clarification from somebody. I'm watching this big mound of dirt being built. It's real pretty. Is the elevation of this development going to be at that level, or is that going to be for backfill? Does anybody know? I just now got the question answered about a 2 stories condos, not 3 stories or something. I just want to know what this is going to look, because from my porch, this is what I see now. You guys are talking about canopies and landscaping, all this thing. I want to know what I'm going to be looking at. That's all. I mean, I can't fight it, but I want to know what I'm looking at when it's said and done. If anybody can help me with that,
So
you
are
can
they
answer.
building it up, Matt, or are they?
They moved the mountain of dirt, I believe.
I mean, it's. I watch them move dirt every day.
Let me address that. Some of you were, I'm not sure if all, but they actually put a topsoil storage pile and got it off of their property. And so that's probably the big mound you saw. And so recently, I'm not sure, in the last month or so, I guess, but they've removed all of that. But more to your point, from the ground as you see it now, after the dirt's been removed, it won't be any higher than that, than maybe 3 or 4 feet.
And the dirt pile?
No. Then after they've removed the dirt pile.
I don't know why I'm the only one who lives in that neighborhood that's here. I'm surprised. But everybody that lives on that back spot was concerned about this because that's what we see. So we've got the question answered to 2 stories. That's my elevation was my next question. If they're going to be adding on top of this, or if they're trying to build a base up, or what the case is on that. I noticed they put up the sill fences last week, which was good. Because like Rob stated earlier, that's a heavily flooded area right there. And we get a lot of washout. There was concern on the first meeting here about where's the runoff going to come from this development at. If there's plans for that. There's a lot of runoff that's going to be coming from that.
Can you answer that, Brent? Can you answer about the runoff on the
Well, the
site?
simple answer is before they get any final approval, Ben over has to approve all the stormwater runoff calculations and plans, and there's a full set of regulations that has to be met.
So it should improve, hopefully.
Well, I hope it does. I mean, he's here with a different concern because he lives right on Schneider, right there where the entrance is going to be at. He'll maybe if you can help him. But that was my concern. And then, does anybody know the actual units, what square footage will be? What pricing of them? Are we looking at what I'm getting at? Is I'm trying to avoid do I need to sell my house now? That's all I'm getting at. Is it going to be like another colony? I don't know. I built my house 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and it's only the 250 to 300,000 range. But these are going to be, that's all I know. If anybody can answer, help me.
I don't know if the
Give me
applicant or
some.
Mr. Brent.
Any kind of qualities of this condos or condo you got to buy, I suppose, right? Apartment you rent.
Yeah, that's going to be another one of my questions too in a minute.
Okay, that's all I'm trying to get at. Let's see if I had another question I could possibly get answered. You guys talk about the second entrance coming in. Is that right? They're talking about Corky, the guy that has the
Landscape business.
landscape business.
That'd be the possibility if it happens. If it ever happens.
And it will be on what side of Corky's property would that be on? Because I know where Lexus Way is at. That's where the traffic light's at. It
I'm
comes
going to go right through his property.
straight, dead straight, like to the left of his house, to the right of his house,
Or the right of his house.
through the house.
Yeah, I'd say I'm just
That'd be
guessing.
hard to say.
A final alignment hasn't been.
Yeah.
I mean, 'cause it's tight through there. I go by, that's where I live, and there's Kentucky Utilities has got a station right there.
Yeah.
It would be on your side of Kentucky Utilities for sure.
So his house may be in the way.
Yeah. Which that's just a proposal.
In the pros, and how wide would this road be?
90-foot right of way. The road width would likely
30, possibly 35, 36 feet or something. It was 3
Okay.
12-foot lanes.
Because that's, you guys are talking traffic flow, I hear it a lot, that would take you out there, but what about Oxford Drive, Oxford Road?
This will take a lot of that traffic off of Oxford Road.
But the cut through coming out, like for me, that's the only way I got to get out.
Yeah.
Everybody coming through that section, that area only has that way to get out, so
Yeah.
they're gonna be zooming through there now. Timberland Way, you all hear, that's like a death trap there. So that's my only concern. I just wanna know if anybody's thinking about that during this whole process. And, I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
You want to speak next?
Jamie Feaster, 170 Schneider Boulevard. Like I just asked Mike, what's gonna set the condos, like what's different about those than the apartments?
Does anybody have a good explanation of condo and apartment?
Other than one you buy, one ownership.
I mean, I could kind of explain it to you, but it probably won't be the best.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one explanation. One you buy, one you rent. So these won't be rentals. There'll be people purchasing them. So potentially, I don't know the answer to that. But it's not going to be a single management company or a single company that owns all of the units and will rent them out. You know, depending on what the condo documents are, which I don't know, people would have a right to rent them just like you can rent a single family home. It would be no different. So that's one you buy, one you rent. You know, another more legal explanation is these condos, you buy a unit, you own everything from the drywall in. You share with everybody else the maintenance of the parking lots, the structure of the building, the roof, the foundations. You own that in common. Does that answer your question?
And then my other issue is the traffic. We have, I believe it's 47 houses directly off of Schneider right now. Then you have all the traffic from Mattingly, Wellesley, Peaceful Landing, John Davis, Stephen Drive. And we see enough traffic already, another 500 people right here. And then also the proposed connection to another neighborhood on the eastern side of this. Do you all believe that Schneider's going to be able to handle that, or are there any changes proposed for that in the future?
First, let's make sure we distinguish that there won't be 500 people coming out of this development.
Not unless there's a second connection.
The second entrance has to be made before they get to 500. First off, they can only build 82 units, and if it's 2.2 per unit is what the average is, then it would be 160 people is what would be in there on the first phase. Well, they're not allowed to even build it past 82 units until the second entrance is made.
So that means this development could go on for a long time.
It could.
And I think Nathan Billings said their intent might be to build the 4 single-family homes. That would be 4 of those units, and then you're down to 78 of the condo units. And it's still, we fell into this one. We weren't there when all this was approved originally, but it's there's a lot of traffic on these few little narrow roads, especially if you're on Old Oxford, New Oxford.
And then that small road that connects.
I think we need Lexus Way. I don't think everybody wants Lexus Way, but you got to have some other way to funnel this traffic in and out.
It's Oxford, just not for that.
Yeah, it's got to go some. And Old Oxford, I think, needs a lot of improvement too.
And that intersection at the end of it with Schneider and that small road that connects to 62, that's all really busy, especially around Toyota start times also.
Do we require a traffic study on this?
I believe we did. It would have been with the zone change, because that's when they were proposing the increase in the density. I did bring the zone change file.
And it was fine with it, I think, then, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure it was.
Schneider was designed, they did a traffic study up front, and then this proposal was not to add any additional traffic than what was already approved.
Yeah.
Without the second entrance.
So to answer your question on the traffic, maybe, I know it sounds kind of like textbook stuff, but
Yeah, I guess so. Thank
when you look at it as a whole, sometimes it doesn't make sense, does it? Is anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Greg Jones. I live at 120 Wellesley Avenue in Pleasant Valley. And I'm here to urge you not to, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why it's even being considered yet, because to my knowledge, Lexus Way isn't in any type of development stage yet. Am I correct in that? Okay. So I have some, information about the traffic, some that's already been expressed here this evening. Basically, there's, you're coming out and there's only a couple of ways to go. One to get onto 62, that's already very difficult to get out there.
Y'all are talking about the little road that comes around.
Yes, and that's still Oxford
the curve.
Drive.
That's pretty much
Oxford, yes. I have it kind of, but so that way, the Toyota entrance, that intersects, and you're coming across 62. So if you need to make a left, it's extremely difficult. Also, on the other side of the landing, which is when you come into Pleasant Valley, if you go straight, that's Pleasant Valley, and if you make a left, the first road, that's the landing. On the other side of the landing, there is already development occurring there as well. So it's going to be even more difficult without any other traffic.
But there is also 2 other entrances up there onto 62 also.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that traffic, if it comes down towards Toyota, that's additional traffic that you're going to have to fight to make a left onto that. So I understand that this proposal, the amount of traffic has already been really approved because of the last time with the 82 units. And this part wouldn't get approved until after a second entrance was made. So I'll skip some of my notes on the traffic, but we all know that it's a bad situation. I think it's pretty evident to everyone. Just as a side note, Urban Group, when they presented back in November that traffic study, according to what they presented, which I think maybe originally came from staff, this would, the increase is going to more than double that. We have no guarantee that the people in the condominiums are going to use that Lexus Way. I mean, there's going to be more traffic on Schneider. In this proposal, they're proposing 407 parking spots. That's a lot of additional cars. I mean, 407. So if I look at Pleasant Valley, the number of 2-car garages, if I add all those up, it's right around the 400 mark. And they're going to be they're proposing 407 additional. That's still a lot of traffic, regardless of which way they go out. And that's not to say there's other single car homes being built now. I think they've got a lot of them built. I don't know how many are sold. And then again, you're going to have Abbey at Old Oxford connecting on to Schneider. Again, that's even more traffic. And then they were talking about another development on the other side of the condominiums. That's even more traffic on Schneider. And we don't need anything else to add to that traffic. Even if there is a second way, it's still going to add to that traffic on Schneider. When we were looking for a home in the Eastern Elementary School District and started looking at Pleasant Valley, there were a few homes for sale, very, very few homes that were there previously, lived-in homes for sale. The same can't be said now. This morning I went around and I just kind of drove around what is Pleasant Valley, and there were 16 homes for sale, not including the developers' homes. So just 16 houses that people had for sale that have been lived in. I think we all know when the inventory goes up, when a lot of people are trying to sell, the price goes down. There's a lot more competition. And then we're going to propose more competition with all those condominiums. One gentleman had already concerned about his property value. I'm concerned about my property value as well. And then I looked back at the original reason for the zoning. I was here in November at that meeting. According to file number ZMA-2017-37, which was their reason, the reason for the original proposal, and they were asking for 170 condominiums at that time. It states, and I quote, the applicant is willing to donate right-of-way for a possible extension of Lexus Way. That was brought up here. That was, in my opinion, I don't know, but I think that was one of the reasons that it was approved, was because, we want to see that Lexus Way. To continue, the applicant is seeking the rezoning to a higher residential density to offset the proposed 90 feet of right-of-way at the southernmost part of the project site. So the reason was they were going to donate 90 feet to give for Lexus Way. They were going to donate that right-of-way. And from my understanding, I think one gentleman said 52 houses. I was thinking it was 50. I think I read that somewhere, but I could be wrong. But I agree. It was low 50s. Does it really take 166 condos and 4 single-family houses to offset the loss of income for that 90 feet? I mean, that was their reason. They said because we need to go to a higher density to offset what we're giving you. I don't know that 90 feet along that property and warrants 166 total condominiums and 4 single-family houses. I think it would be good to see, because that was the reason for their original proposal, I think we need to see some sort of cost study. What is the typical development, what are they going to make for those 50 houses, and how many condominiums is it going to equal that? The reason why I think that is a good thing to have is because that was the reason for their proposal. If they didn't mention that, if it was something else, it wouldn't be necessarily, who cares? It's their profits. But that was the reason for their approval. So I think that we should take that into consideration, knowing that our property values are going to go down, or at least they're not going to increase as much as they should without those.
I want to stop you right there.
Yes.
Because I don't like that statement, because you don't know what your property values are going to do. And everybody throws that at us every time we hear an application. And that is so aggravating to sit here and listen to that, knowing that you can't tell the future. You can't tell me that a year from now your property value is going to be here or it's going to be here. You can't tell me that. So I'd really like to not have that anymore with property values. That is your opinion.
Right.
And you're allowed to voice your opinion. But that just bothers me that everybody throws out, well, it's going to hurt my property values. I just don't get that.
Well, I think it's a consensus when somebody else has mentioned it earlier as well.
It might be a consensus with everybody that lives in Pleasant Valley, but that doesn't mean it's true. And I don't think this commission needs to consider that as part of this hearing.
That's for y'all to decide.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. So the current plan of 166 condos and 4 single-family houses is too much. Just because it's zoned for 170, my understanding, it doesn't mean that it has to be 170. I think that there could be a compromise in there somewhere. Maybe it's more than 82. I mean, they've already got the approval for the 82, but I certainly don't think that it's at 170. The other thing, in that meeting in November, and there was a lot more people here in November.
That's surprising, nobody's here tonight.
I agree.
We got a full crowd, but.
We had 350, over 350 signatures against that proposal. Overwhelmingly in the neighborhood, not in just Pleasant Valley, but those surrounding were against it. That night, there was multiple people that spoke. Nobody was for that lived in Pleasant Valley or the surrounding areas. I left at late. I know you all left later than I did, and it was midnight when I left, or right around there. So, you had mentioned trees. Urban Group said that they would try to keep the trees behind the affected houses. Well, there was already trees bulldozed on November 20th, just after that meeting. I don't know why they bulldozed them down. I don't know if one of the conditions of approval was to keep the trees. I don't know if they
Was
tried
that on this property? Was that on this proposal?
It's behind the area, and it's got to be attached to this property. I don't know if they could address the trees that have already been bulldozed. Urban Group agreed with back in November. They initially said 170, and then they were trying to. I think the approval was if it was below or if it was 100 and above, they had to have a second access. So they had a slide that said 99 is appropriate. Again, there's no second access. There's no, even in this plan, there's no second access there, and they're talking about potentially a second access, one that hasn't been created, hasn't been in a planning stage or anything like that. Staff at that time, you all approved 82, and there's no reason to approve any more now. The conditions are the same. I have a 7-year-old boy. He keeps asking me the same things over and over, and it's the same conditions. And that's exactly what Urban Group is. There's no new difference. There's no difference between now and November. And they're back again asking for 170 units. It's the exact same condition. Nothing has changed.
The 82 is still in effect.
82 is still in effect, but they're still asking for a total of 170.
No, it's.
166.
Well, yeah.
It's
Well, plus the 4.
Correct.
The only way they'll get 170 is if there's a second entrance, though. I mean,
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know why there is a second entrance.
Yeah, 170 was approved.
Matt, come on up here, sir.
So what they're seeking now is preliminary approval. And so they're looking for preliminary approval of basically everything that they're looking to do with the site. Typically after that step, they would go to final development plan, which is construction documents. And so what we would do to hold them to the 82 is we would only allow them to construct 82 dwelling units until they have a second entrance. So right now they're looking for preliminary approval of the entire thing, but in reality this will likely be 2 phases. They'll do one phase where they'll do 82 or some number less than that, and then they'll do a second or third phase, I don't know, to get them the rest of the way constructed.
But that'll be after the road, the second access.
Yes, that would be contingent upon them getting a second.
Which could be 20 years or.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's, I guess, why I'm having a hard time understanding why it's even being entertained right now. I mean, they have the approval for the 82. There's no true second entrance immediately.
Well, that's Lexus Way.
They have
It's
zoning approval. They have zoning approval already. Now they need to get, this is just the process they have to go through. Now they have to get development plan approval. That's why they're coming back.
Okay. I would urge y'all to, they're asking for 170. That, again, the reason that they originally asked was so that they could provide the right of way for the 90 feet for Lexus Way. Does that warrant giving them 166 condos and 4 single-family homes? I don't think it does. So I'm asking you just to reject it. I mean, there's no approval for the Lexus Way. There's no second entrance approval. So in my opinion, and what I'm asking you to do is just reject it now until the time that Lexus Way, and again, the last time on the staff notes, it said the same thing, until after Lexus Way is built. And I think that's a good time to bring this up, or at least when Lexus Way is in some sort of planning stage. That's all I have.
Thanks, sir. Matt?
From what I remember, they could go on and build houses on this property before we did the zone change, right?
yeah,
How many houses could they have built?
I don't remember if the number is 50 or 52, but
It was only
it's
50.
it's somewhere in that neighborhood. They have preliminary approval for single-family homes on this lot already.
If I remember correctly, it was 50, and did we not allow potentially 10 lots, so a reduction of 10 lots to 40, which would have been Lexus Way? That sound right, Matt? 50, and then 10 lots were given to,
It might have been.
potentially for
I don't
Lexus
have that
Before the zone
folder with me right now.
Yeah, before the zone change.
But Ben also said they had preliminary approval, but they also had approval for construction documents for those single-family homes previously.
Does anyone else?
If I may, I have the part.
Yeah, that's fine.
From the last time in the, according to the ZMA-2017-37 Pleasant Valley subdivision, page 3 of 4, the proposed dwelling units was 50, and then this was the traffic study I think that you all were referencing earlier, and the single family, what was approved was 50 originally, then it was changed to 82 condominiums in November and things. So I don't know if y'all want to see this or not.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak? Mr. Combs?
Brent Combs, Thoroughbred Engineering. I just want to clarify something. My understanding at the zoning approval stage was that, in fact, it was rezoned R12, and it was approved for 170. There was a condition that only the first 82 could be built until there's a second entrance, but the approval included the 170, is what I understood.
I think Mr. Combs is right. I think that's the way it was approved.
Any other questions? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Combs said is during the zone change is when the density was changed and approved with the condition that only 82 units could be constructed until such time as there's a second entrance, which gives similar traffic to what was already there, which was already approved. So it was there was no net change on the additional, the first 82. I guess for the record, those issues were dealt with at a zone change, and the plan that we proposed, we think is consistent with the zoning ordinance, with the comprehensive plan, and that's the considerations that we take a look at this evening. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions from the commission? Any more questions?
Now, I would say that this 90-foot dedication of right-of-way has kind of set the ball rolling, I think, for potential of a Lexus Way extension in the future. I mean, when Lexus Way was put in, it was a incentive package, I suppose, from the state, and nobody knew where it was going to go until it was built, and just happened to end at Cherry Blossom. It'd been nice if it had continued on across a little bit further, at least made it to Oxford Road or Oxford Village, whatever they call it. I think it's Oxford.
Oxford.
And then it'd be nice if it continued on over to Old Oxford. And then at some point, maybe we can improve Old Oxford over to make a connection to Newtown Pike or both directions. But if those improvements don't happen, there aren't too many options in this area. So I think it has been good in that way. I know I think I voted against this plan last year, but I know it was a hard decision, because if you don't keep that, if they built houses in that area, there wouldn't be any potential for Lexus Way to ever happen. I think the Lexus Way extension, if you look at it on a map, if you can take Lexus Way off, if you can take Old Oxford, New Oxford Road either way and feed them into that area, go straight across. If you're going to the high school, it's a direct shot. You pop out on Champion Way, take a right, and you're at either the new high, you can go on around to the new high school or the old high school. Or you can go to two different middle schools, Royal Spring, and Scott County Middle School. That's a whole lot of traffic right there. And then it's also a direct shot straight to Toyota. If you happen to work at Toyota or you're going to the interstate, it's a great flow. But Lexus Way has to happen first.
I got one other question. These are proposed as condos. Is there any time that these are being built that it could change to be apartments or something else other than condos? Is there something that keeps it to where it has to be condos? Unless they come back before the commission, right?
Well, I'm not so certain that there's anything you can do to enforce that, certainly not entirely. Because in fact, I believe, as was said just a little while ago, when they sell these, there's not anything that's going to keep, well, let me back up. I suppose if the condominium regime has a restriction in it that says,
no renting.
Yeah, this has to be owner occupied. They could do that. I've not seen what they've got. I think you even said those things haven't been drawn yet. But if those rules that would in effect be enforced by their homeowners, if those rules don't prohibit the owner from renting them out, then you could end up having a number of rental units. I can't imagine it would become nothing but that would be possible. If the condominium regime includes you can't rent these out, they got to be owner occupied, that of course makes it more difficult perhaps for them to sell them, but the condominium regime could then enforce that rule so that it wouldn't be that way. It's a difficult, it's a difficult line to maintain.
Is that something the commission could stipulate?
That's not a topic we usually get into. I mean, it really isn't. And I'm not saying this fine gentleman's going to sue us if we tried to get into that area, but that's a number one. It's not an area we've ever gotten into, because our role generally is this type of housing, this type of density, this type of transportation. We don't get into property values. That's not really anything we can do. Basically, we let people develop, but we then try to help design it so that you can get around. We don't have too much of one thing over another. We've got a nice mix. We've got the various uses that make for a good community. And that usually does not include you can't rent these, you got to own these. So I'd like to see maybe them put that in their condominium regime. I know some of the neighbors would like to see them put that in there. I'm not real comfortable if we try to do that, because I think that's a little bit probably beyond where government needs to be, period.
Beyond our authority, that's right.
And I'll just add, before anything ground's broken, there's going to be, the condominium regime will be established. So it's not going to be apartments. It's not going to be apartments as we all think of them, as one owner renting out to various different people. That will be before the first lot's sold. It will be set up as a condominium, and that will be reported in the chain of title in the county clerk's office.
Yeah, that's my only concern, 'cause I don't remember, maybe Mike said it or something, one of them said something about, it turning into a big apartment complex, and that would be horrible in this area. And cherry blossoms on this side, and, 250 range homes on this side, 400,000 homes on this side, it'd just be, condominiums would be nice if they're done right. I think I just don't wanna see it turn into some big apartment rental.
Do you have any idea how much these condos would go for, roughly?
I don't. If you look
Any
at
idea
it,
on the square feet?
I don't, but if you look at it, there's a mix of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. And so I think you're going to see various different price points. I certainly think the developer is committed to keep the development consistent with Cherry Blossom, Pleasant Valley, those areas. Certainly it's not the intent to throw up something and try to bleed off location-wise. We want to be consistent, and that's something the developer said throughout this process. It's committed not to build apartments. If you saw the parking's on the inside, we've listened to the community about the facades are outward facing, so you're going to see the front. The developer's committed to working with his neighbors. And
The one thing that scares me is like the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. You don't see too many people wanting to invest quite a bit of money in a 1 bedroom unit. And that scares me. That as far as it turning into an apartment complex. Not per se, but.
Well, and I think again, it's a range of options for the buyers. And
I don't know the market. But it just, that would scare me.
There are a few one bedroom condos that we've done appraisals on.
Is there?
Yeah.
And I think, for young folks starting out, that's a great option. It adds a diverse mix of housing options to the area.
Anybody have any other questions? I'm done questioning.
1 bedroom condo would be nice for a retired couple who might not want to take care of some grass. Think about it.
Yeah, if it was on Lake Okeechobee.
Let's go.
Or even Buckhorn Creek.
That's just my opinion, but thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Has anybody got any other questions or comments? Anybody else? All right, we need a motion.
If I might interrupt though before you get to a motion, you all had discussed earlier an additional condition number 12, where the applicant, obviously in cooperation with staff, would then designate the trees that are on their property so that what actually is under their control, what can be protected. And I just want to get the wording right before I start adding something on here. But the way I got it, at least, they would designate what's on their property, staff would view that, and then they'd kind of work out what, if anything, needs to be added. Because clearly, if some of those trees are not on their property, then they had no control over that. Now, is that, do I understand that correctly? Well, in that case, let me just kind of work on it while you all try to.
A cataloging of existing trees, existing canopy.
Well, the way I've got it worded so far, I need to finish, is they will designate the canopy trees along the east side on their property, so they and staff can determine what they control and what they might need to add to
What
that.
they might need to add, yes.
Okay, and then that addition would be at the final.
But what if trees off of their property fill in that canopy? Do they still have to fill in between those trees on their property?
Well, if it's not on their property, then they'll
Yeah, that's
have to.
typically, you really don't ever get to count what's not on your property.
Okay.
That's the way it works.
Even if it's a foot over, they still
Although
have to plant a tree.
it's dense as it can be, considering both properties, they still have to.
And that comes more into play on commercial developments, but if you go out and look around, you'll see one lot has its hedges right on the property line, and the next one has its, and so it's got double roads. And you think, well, we just needed one, but you never know when one might change ownership, and then all of a sudden it's gone. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of the thinking behind it.
Thank you, Ben. Any other questions? We'll take a motion if there's no other discussion on this matter.
I make a motion for approval of PDP 2018-18 Pleasant Valley Townhomes Condos with the 12 conditions of approval and. Is that it?
There were 2 waivers.
And the two waivers.
I'll second that motion.
By Ms. Mizell, a second by Mr. Solsky. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're gonna have to raise hands or something, cause I can't catch all of them. Who's in? I'll just call a roll call. Mr. Wiseman?
No.
Mr. Solsky?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Mifflin?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mizell?
Yes.
It's, motion is approved, so.
Did you want to state yea or nay?
I'm kinda crossing between this one. I don't know which way to go on it. I'm gonna abstain from this one, so. I don't know which way to go on it. So, motion is approved. Has enough votes to be approved, so.
Second. Don't forget to sign. Only if you could be quick.
I will be. I was going to give you just sort of an update as far as where we are. We met with the Parks and Rec and with the city on Tuesday. They want to kind of continue working with us as far as what some of these requirements might look like for
On open space
parkland and open space.
So we need to continue that till the next meeting?
Yes, if we could continue the hearing to next month. But I also wanted to let you know I have been working on getting together some sort of samples of what some of our existing developments would look like with these changes. So.
Are you talking about conditions that we would place on Parks and Rec, or were they just?
No. This is, if you recall, we were talking about potentially setting in the subregs a standard for how much parkland would be required with PUD and non-PUD developments, residential developments. So that's still work that's ongoing.
So we met with Parks and Rec to see what their needs were.
Yeah.
Whether they'd be willing to accept new parkland, kind of what their thoughts were, whether we needed to go to Parks and Rec board, just to kind of get their feedback.
Do we impose any restrictions on county parks?
Are we gonna talk about this? If not, if we are, we need to open up a public hearing.
I don't really have any new information other than that
If we're
update.
gonna do it, we need to open up a public hearing.
Right.
No, we don't.
We don't.
Thank you, Matt.
Just a point of information.
You've already given us the open, approved projects and agenda items, right? So
Yeah, the last item.
The last item is gonna be the Dwyer property.
Bruce Langford. Bruce, you ready?
And you all added that,
Yeah. Joe
Wanted to
did.
request
Mr. Langford
a
did.
waiver for Miami Farm.
At the last meeting, and I believe it was the last meeting, you approved the development plan for Miami Valley Barns on US 25 south going to Lexington. And what he proposes, of course, I think you already know this, is included in the letter that I sent to you, making this request that you allow him to phase in the things that you required him to do. You required him to place gravel, put out 20 trees, put down concrete, to ditch the bank in the back. And the fifth requirement had to do with his office, which he's not going to have an office on the site, so he won't have to have the septic system. But he's going to have a 2-year lease. He thinks maybe after a year he'll know if he this is gonna be a viable opportunity for him, whether he make a go of it at this site. So what he would like to do is be able to phase in, for example, do a third of the gravel, a third of the trees, maybe put the concrete in after a year, the ditch in after a year or two, after he sees how this location is gonna work. I think what he's proposing to do is gonna be an improvement to the property. It's not gonna create a lot of traffic, it's not gonna be unseemly, it's gonna be helpful in the community from that perspective. And, this is Nate Yoder. Nate, raise your hand up, right? He's the gentleman that's gonna try to operate this business at this location. And so we're just asking you to bear with him while he tries to get his feet on the ground and see if he can work at this location, and then he'll put these conditions to completion. It's that simple.
Does everybody understand what he's asking for? Y'all, any discussion on it?
I would say that this is, we're not talking about putting in a lot of permanent infrastructure or anything on this site, so if it doesn't succeed, I mean, if you shouldn't succeed, then I can't see where we've done a great deal of harm or anything to the property. You're not gonna leave something there that's not, can't be occupied by someone in the future. But, you're talking about selling barns and storage sheds.
He got an estimate of about $40,000 to put in those improvements.
And do you think these can be done as the way you stated? Put in a third, and a third?
If you approve it that way, yes, if you approve it that, can you do that, Nate?
Within a year, you can complete the gravel and put the rest of the trees in, or you think it'd take them longer than a year?
I guess what I'd like to do is kind of have an idea of how the location does for me before I spend that much money on it. It's like you said, it's not going to hurt the property, but it's just I'll have to sell a lot of sheds to pay for that amount, plus my lease payments that I'm paying at Jim.
How many buildings do you think you'll have spotted there at any one time?
It's gonna vary some. I mean, if we start with a smaller area, probably 20 buildings. I think we showed around 30 on the development plan.
Do you have other sites that you sell? I assume you have other places you sell from now, don't you?
Yeah. I have one in Cynthiana and one in Crittenden. Those would be the only two I have here in Kentucky.
And so initially, you're not wanting to put any gravel down, is that correct?
I would need gravel. I would
Okay.
need some gravel. The
Good.
concrete, I don't need. The trees, I mean, I'd be willing to plant some if we had to do that, you know, for the first year.
Do you need gravel to set these buildings on, or just for parking?
I don't, just for parking and for truck access to bring the buildings in.
So the main thing is just the visibility and having the ability to load them and deliver them from close.
Right, and you know, most of these buildings, once they go out to the consumer, they'll be in their backyard, sitting in the grass. So setting them in the grass is really the best way to display them, if you'll allow me to do that. I can work with gravel, it's more expense.
I've got a question for staff. Is this a letter for application for a zone change or?
No, this is already
Zone
been
change
approved.
already
Already
happened.
been
This is-
approved?
Yeah, this property zone commercial.
Okay,
This is a waiver on the conditions.
okay. I just want to understand the,
It was owned about 10 or 12 years ago.
okay.
So I
We've
heard
been
Mr.
trying to find a
Langford,
good use for it since then.
I heard Mr. Langford say a third, a third, a third. You said on the development plan, it's gonna put 30 units, so a third's only 10 units.
True.
So, but you said you was gonna put 20.
Well, I'm flexible. I can work with you.
As far as the concrete and stuff, we have to make an entrance.
There is an existing hard surface entrance there.
Okay, like a concrete or
It's
blacktop
asphalt
or
blacktop.
okay.
I think so, to the edge of the road.
Joe, what did we do for Emerson Orchard? Emerson Farms?
Don't remember, to be honest, Matt, do you remember?
I do remember.
Seems like we just wrote them a letter not too long ago about what they was doing out there.
With that particular one, they were only approved for the paved entrance and paved parking lot. To my knowledge, Mr. Kleinhens is still somewhat in violation because he has yet to submit an amended development plan and seek approval of gravel from this body. He has not yet submitted that.
So we required him to have blacktop to set his buildings on.
At the
What
time
did
that
we
he
do with
came
this?
before the planning commission, he did not indicate that he was going to have buildings stored in the grass or on pavement or gravel. But he didn't indicate that on his development plan.
But now we're trying to force him to put his buildings on gravel? Or his parking area?
No, So the issue there is after he received preliminary and final development plan approval, he went and added his own gravel driveway and began storing buildings out there without the approval of this body or the Board of Adjustment, which then prompted us to make him go back to the Board of Adjustment for that approval. One of the conditions of that, and Mr. Kleinens was present at that meeting, was that he then submit an amended development plan to the Planning Commission so that they could so that you all could make a ruling as far as whether or not that gravel driveway and parking or in storage area was allowed.
Okay, I was just trying to
Make
sure we're serving everybody
I would
the
say
same.
it's similar maybe in the sense that there are, they're proposing storing sheds and things of that nature on a gravel area, but as far as the nature, as far as how they went about getting their development plans approved, was different.
So they're Emerson's on grass, correct, Matt?
Emerson's illegal altogether. so
Well, okay.
Doesn't matter.
Emerson got a development plan approved. Did they show, when they built a paved parking lot for the building, around the building, did they show any outdoor storage on their development plan?
No.
See, they didn't show any,
So
we
they're
didn't
ill-
know they were.
Yeah, they're illegal anyway, so it don't make no difference what they're
So
doing.
when they did start storing barns out there, we made them go to Board of Adjustment for a conditional use permit for outdoor storage. Board of Adjustment said, go back to Planning Commission, and they can tell you whether you can have gravel or grass or asphalt, and they haven't submitted the development plan.
Yeah, I think the Board of Adjustment just approved the outdoor storage.
Yes.
But then it was up to this body to determine what the surface and all would have to be. And if I could just point out, consistent with Steve's question point a little bit ago, Paul's made improvements. That lot is now what it is. This lot, as he pointed out, if this business doesn't fail, there's been no great dramatic change to the property. It's going to be as available for anything, period. That's not quite the case on North 25.
Any recommendations?
I think we've already approved the development plan, which was very minor to start with. Pavement, I guess there's some paved area there already.
There is.
If Mr. Yoder is willing to proceed as Mr. Langford stated, and you're saying a third, and a third.
Well, that's just a suggestion, yes.
A third of the trees, a third of the gravel, and a third of what, the concrete area? Or is that, or are you talking about a third of the proposed
Well, as soon as he finds out what he needs, that's what's going to determine that. After he has a track record at the property, he'll know what he needs. And he can accommodate it, do whatever he has to do to accommodate those needs.
Do we know if the entrance is suitable?
I don't know, we haven't, Michaela was just telling me we don't have an approved final development plan on it yet, so I'm not even sure personally without going back and looking at it, what the improvements we're asking for. I mean, if we had an approved final development plan, we can kind of figure out how to.
Yeah, what have you got so far? Just got a preliminary plan?
Yeah.
Is this a concept plan, or is this a preliminary development plan, or is this just go ahead?
But
Now we don't.
you have
They don't
approved
even
a
have
preliminary plan?
Yes.
I think we're putting the cart before the horse now. Y'all think we're putting the cart before the horse?
Well, I mean, it would be nice to have the final development plan approved, and then we know what how the site would build out,
Should be,
when
should be a
complete.
preliminary development plan, shouldn't it?
Well, we have that.
We have a
We do have a
preliminary.
preliminary.
This is asking for a variance from the preliminary development plan conditions.
Only to the extent they would be phased in.
Phased in, right.
Yeah.
Rather than everything having to be put in right from the beginning.
That's right.
And you're not talking,
I
it's
mean, I
not, it's
would
not
think-
like this isn't like a car lot where if you park a car out in the grass, it's gonna sink in the mud. These sheds are gonna be sitting in grass for the rest of their life anyhow, so. You back the trailer in.
We could, if you did come to a decision, we could just make sure that Pat Darnell incorporates that into the final development plan and the phasing of it, but, our past practice has been to at least have any customer parking be paved, have a
I think that
turnaround
needs to
for-
happen. I
for
believe
people
within,
that come in to visit the site, they're not pulling in on the grass, they're not.
Well, we're not,
running gravel.
we're not saying don't do it. We're saying give us an opportunity to phase it in
Right.
as we grow on
That's
the
what I'm
property.
saying.
Yeah.
But how long do you think you need that? Is that a year, or are you thinking a year and a half?
Year.
A year, all right. I think
Another
that's
thing that
reasonable.
comes into the picture is if we put in the paved or the hard surface parking area, then we need that ditch on the backside for stormwater, water quality and everything.
Yeah.
So it's just like the further we
adds.
got into this, the more stuff we got into, and it's more money than I want to spend. I know it's not a lot of money to what some of these other projects you worked at, but
Right.
I'm not a billionaire. I work for a living, so I'd like to make a little money on
I
the
don't think it's
road.
unreasonable.
I think the problem we had, when we talked a little bit about it, executive committee is kind of like selling campers without an office, or, they tried to sell campers with just pull them up front and sell them before the building's up, and kind of like selling hot dogs in a parking lot, and we'll think about building a building if we sell enough hot dogs out of our car. And that's probably an extreme example, but, I think we set a precedence if we do this and let somebody sell, and not to just pick on you, Mr. Yoder, but if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, you can move on and not invest anything or very little amount of money. It's opening up a business and you've got a couple locations is a gamble, and
Yeah, and I've thought about that too. This young man trying to better himself and run his own business, which most people do have dreams of having their own business and growing. But I just don't want to set a precedence of allowing somebody to do a third, or, the next thing you know, we're going to have a subdivision come in and say, well, just let me do a third of it. And then I'll come back.
Well, you
later.
phase subdivisions in all the time.
Yeah, they do phase the subdivisions in all the time. I
phase
guess that was a wrong
Infrastructure.
kind of
That was the wrong
analogy,
example.
but I knew he would get me
Just
on
like
that.
Pleasant Valley.
Yeah, I knew he would get me on that. I should have never said it, but.
If he gets this thing done by this time next year, then I think that's reasonable.
But I also look at this being the entrance into Scott County too, and to me, the buildings need to set on gravel. You put them on that dirt. Rains, what's going to happen? You pull one out, there's mud on the 25. I don't think it's the best situation for that. So that's just my opinion.
So, question, so are they storage sheds or?
Storage sheds.
Storage sheds or buildings?
Well, storage sheds, buildings, yeah.
Okay.
One difference here is the RV people tried to kind of pull the wool over our eyes, and he's being completely upfront. about
Yeah,
it. So
I think he's
that's
asking,
different too.
he's doing it the way it should be done.
Yeah.
We're asking just phase in, give him a chance to get his feet on the ground at this location, make improvements that would be for the benefit of the county. If it works out, all's well and good. If it doesn't work out, he'll be somewhere else.
As I'm told by my boss, probably on a monthly basis, Scott County is the fastest growing county in the state of Kentucky. I think he'll do well here. And it probably is a good, if I were a gambling man, and I don't gamble too often, except for Derby, it might be a good place to have sheds being sold. That's for
Highway
sure.
Department just in front of the property. The lots are so small that they can't be used for a lot of things.
No, we've
Used
already,
car lot maybe or something like that. This would be better.
we've already had two try to use that on.
For sheds?
No,
Mm-mm.
the one for the t-shirt shop, it seemed like there was something before that.
Yeah, that I remember they fell through.
Not in many businesses, you don't have to have a restroom. Well, this will work. Give him a shot. Let him try.
I'd make the motion,
Make it.
just as Mr. Langford said, he'll phase it in, put about, he already has existing blacktop, he'll put in a third of the trees, a third or more of the gravel. I think he probably needs to put more gravel in, because eventually that gravel, some of it hopefully would be covered with pavement or concrete.
I don't think there's any blacktop, Steve, right? There's no blacktop.
Just
The entrance.
asphalt entrance to the right of way.
Just to the curb, really,
I
right?
think it was parking for the public that was gonna be.
Highway Department put a blacktop.
Oh, so you do have,
That's a fair amount.
so that's about 30
Yeah,
feet,
that's
40 feet?
Well, it's more than that, 40 or 50.
Oh,
Well, that's true. But people can still pull in there and park.
A third of the trees, a third of the gravel, and
No, I think you need a bit more than a third of the gravel. The gravel's the cheapest part of it, I think.
That's what I'm-
Limited 10 buildings and then gravel to 10 buildings.
Is that fair enough, Mr. Yoder?
Saying that there's about 30 feet of pavement on the property already.
On the
Yeah.
property.
Extends pretty much across the easement for the gas line and water line.
So if you put in, you go on and put in, maybe half of the gravel, at least half. The gravel will give you an area to turn around anyhow, regardless of, rain or mud. What else do we need to address?
what'd you say, a third trees, a third gravel, and what?
More than a third. I'd say go on and put in half the gravel and then,
Half
and then,
the-
and the thing is, this thing needs to be complete by a year from now, right? Or you need to make a decision.
He was
a year
asking
from now.
2 years
Can you
originally.
do that?
And
Who's gonna determine how much is a half or a third of the gravel?
Half of what?
That's
Let
gonna
us
be
work
hard.
with the staff.
Based on
I
the
think
plan,
we just need to-
based on what we proposed. They had a drawing for the preliminary development plan.
Let us work with the staff on how we implement it.
You just
Fair
wanna
enough.
say that, Steve? Just
I
work
think
with the
that's fair
staff,
enough.
on
Yeah, I
staff on
believe-
implementation?
Yep.
So I can
Okay,
scratch all
Joe?
this stuff I've been writing down?
yeah,
Yeah, if we get a little better guidance.
Well, we can do that.
Get out,
and 10 buildings.
10 buildings, gravel for the building, enough gravel to set the buildings on.
you
Yeah.
understand that,
Turnaround.
3/8 trees, 2/3 gravel, and 6.5 buildings. Jeez.
Hey, he actually smiles.
Nate says that he would have a better inventory if he could have 15 buildings.
I mean, I can do half the gravel. I don't have a problem with doing half the gravel,
Okay.
half the buildings.
Okay.
And maybe a third of the trees like he requested.
and do us a favor, if it's raining and muddy, don't track any mud out on 25.
Good luck. Good
about-
luck.
What about the ditch along the back? Is that,
I think if Ben requires it, I think it has to be done.
Which I
Well,
think
that'd
that
have to be
was
done
only for
a
the
year
hard
from now, right?
surface, right?
No, I
Has to be
think
done
if it has to be done for him to put these buildings on there, it needs to be done now. I think it's Ben's decision.
Basically to treat the paved area.
Which he won't be doing any more paving. He's already got his pavement round, right?
Well,
So he
he's gonna
shouldn't
put
have
down
to pave
gravel,
it.
you're not gonna have runoff from that gravel.
Yeah, so if he doesn't do any more paving, he shouldn't have to worry about a ditch.
I'll look at what they propose, and there's
If
gonna
it's
be runoff,
reasonable.
then you need some kind of treatment there. If it's gravel and you got plenty of grass, then it's probably gonna be fine.
He's got all that vegetation on that bank already, if you go digging of it, you're gonna create a worse problem.
Grass filter strip.
Joe, is that enough to go on?
Yeah, I think so.
So Steve, did you actually make a motion?
Steve made the motion.
I think I did.
I wonder,
To
I
approve.
did too. I second the motion then.
Miss Mizell got you this time
Oh, she got that.
on that. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
I'm voting no.
I'm voting no too.
All right.
Are you voting no?
You look very good. The shirt and the
It's approved.
blue in there matches
You know.
perfectly.
Thank you.
Charlie, will you have to draw anything up?
Bruce, I think you just wore us out, cause it's past my bedtime.
We're all just gonna remember this one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
He said, okay.
Should have stand up to the adjourn, Joe.
I voted no. They don't get the newspaper here.
They should get us a 10% discount on it.
Adjourned.
I talked
Going on. Should get us a 10% discount on it.
Go ahead, Todd. I bet you he will.
I don't think they said
There might be a conflict of interest.
That might go against our ethics.